The views, comments, stories, and opinions shared within this podcast are my own or those of my guests, and in no way represent the views of the company or companies that I or we work for. All stories, events, and tales shared within this episode may or may not have happened in the manner in which they are told. They may or may not have even happened at all. The details have been changed to protect the innocent and the guilty alike. This is Squawk Ident.
Southwest 2669, wind 2008, runway 26 back, takeoff. 26 back, takeoff, Southwest 2669. Southwest 2669 and boarding. 26 right. Southwest 2669, roger that. Cancel takeoff clearance. Do you require any additional assistance? That's a negative. We had a wind shear alert. Power up. Roger that. Southwest 2669, just read back cancel takeoff clearance for me. Cancel takeoff clearance, Southwest 2669. Southwest 2669. E-taxi down to Alpha 4 for me. Exit at Alpha 4, ground 121.1. Alpha 4.1, Southwest 2669.
You're listening to Squawk Ident, an aviation podcast dedicated to the journey and the challenges surrounding the life and career of Aviator Tony, his co-hosts, and his guests. Together, we will explore the many pathways to an aviation profession, the realities of what a professional aviator can expect in today's marketplace, and we share many stories along the way. I'm your host, Aviator Tony, an airline pilot currently flying for a legacy airline with close to 20 years on the flight line. This is episode 62 of Squawk Ident, recorded on the 10th of November, 2020, from the Aviator Sound Studios from somewhere in Southern California. On today's show, we have the opportunity to speak with an exceptional aviator, an aircraft fabricator, a live sound engineer, and a culinary master chef. He is a Western Illinois University graduate from Music Business Management, a professional flight instructor, and currently an Embraer 175 captain for an airline we here on the show like to call SandPiper Regional. He will be joining us to discuss his journey in aviation, his current aircraft build project, and how the robust downturn has affected him and his family. But before we dive into his story, let me first introduce an amazing aviator and Squawk Ident co-host. To help me in navigating Flight 62 of Squawk Ident, he is a professional CFI MEI flight instructor, a former Embraer 145 airline pilot, a King Air flight instructor, a Falcon 2000 commander, and a corporate operator as well. He joins us today from his top secret man cave deep underground, but still within a stone's throw of the local GA airport. From somewhere in San Diego, please help me in welcoming back to the show our very own Captain Roger. Captain, how the heck are you doing?
I'm doing all right, Tony. How are you? It's good to be back.
It's good to have you back. So what have you been up to?
Thank you. Well, same old. Lots of work still. I did have a few days off last week, but then I was back this weekend and worked another 4 days in a row. Fortunately, shorter trips this time, mostly within the state of California for the most part, but still working a fair amount. Which is good.
Yeah, that's excellent. You know, and I'm really glad to see that you actually have a couple days off at home with the family. Are they telling you I forgot what you look like yet?
That was something that I did actually bring up last month. At the end of last month, I literally said that. I was like, I think my kids are going to forget what I look like because, for 2 months there, it was pretty much nonstop. So far, November's been a little bit better, and I got just a few day trips this week. So
yeah,
hopefully things will kind of moderate out a little bit here.
Yeah. Well, I'm really happy for you. It was kind of scary there for all of us with the downturn in the industry. We're going to hopefully talk a little bit about that a little later in the show. But
Sure.
The fact that you're flying now with quite some regularity is absolutely wonderful.
It's a good problem to have. I mean, it's really, I guess, the best way to describe it.
Yeah.
Is a good problem to have.
Yeah, flying a little too much.
Exactly.
What are you going to do?
Yeah.
Well, Rob D is going to be joining us here in a little bit. He had to run some last-minute errands, and we'll let him kind of talk about what he's been dealing with in the past 24 hours as he joins us a little later in the show. But now that our pre-flight is complete, let's push off the gate, start up those virtual podcast engines, and get ready for takeoff. Joining us today is a fantastic aviator. He's here to discuss his journey in aviation. I first met him out on the flight line somewhere around 2018, when we both worked for a company we hear on the show called SandPiper Regional. He and I flew together a few times out there on the flight line, but what makes him very special to me is that we flew my very last trip there at SandPiper together. It's the farewell flight, as it's sometimes called. And he made the whole experience just a whole lot of fun. I don't think we laughed that hard in a long time. It was wonderful. He joins us from his RV7 factory in Clow International Airport in Bolingbrook, Illinois. Please help me in welcoming to the show, Captain Tony. Captain, how you doing?
Thanks, Tony. I'm doing well. Just like everybody, just, wanting the industry to spin back up, get our passengers flying again and get back to what we call normal life.
Normal? What's that? I don't.
What's that?
We keep talking about this new normal, the new normal. I don't know what that is. I don't think there is a new normal. I think it's just going to be different.
I think you're right.
Everyone's going to have, it used to be you had to have your cell phone, your wallet, and your keys. And that was the pat down. You didn't leave a room or the house or the cockpit airplane, until you did the pat down and you checked to make sure you have your wallet, your cell phone, and your keys. Now we're going to add mask to that. So wallet, cell phone, keys, and at least one face mask.
I have one question regarding that. I'm kind of curious if this is just me. How many times have you guys left your hotel rooms when you're on a trip and on the elevator on the way down to then realize that you did not have your mask and had to ride the elevator back up to your room to get the mask and then come back downstairs again? Is this just my problem? Because I do this
more than I'd like to admit.
Okay. Yeah. I guess I'll just admit it. I do it every single overnight. If I'm 100% at a hotel, of the time, I will leave the hotel room without my mask.
See, I put my keys or I put my hotel room key like on top of the mask. So because I was walking out almost 100% of the time as well. And then I got it down to like half the time. I would leave the mask and I'd get to the elevator and I'd go, oh shit. And then I'd have to turn around and go back there. And I know other people do it too, because I see people all the time. They're out there in the hallway and then all of a sudden they see you and they recognize that, oh crap, I don't have a mask on. And then they put their t-shirt up over their mouth and they, hubble back onto
I've been that guy.
Yeah, that's you.
Sure panic.
Yeah, that was me too. I mean, it's not a big deal. Just stay, 6.0 feet away from people. You're fine. But yeah, it's kind of a thing now.
Say 2 meters. 2 meters.
2 meters. It's a little bit more than 6 feet, isn't it? Yeah. So, but great to have you on, Tony. I'm so happy to finally get you on the show. And thanks for agreeing to doing this. I'm really looking forward to hearing about not just your journey, but your build, your aircraft build. So let's get started. Your journey began at a relatively young age. What is it that sparked this passion for aviation for you?
My first memories of airplanes, we would go see my grandmother down in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. So since I can remember, I was riding on airplanes as a passenger, and that really made an impression on me. Fast forward to when I was 12 years old, I get my first airplane ride, and something that looked like it was from Star Wars. I mean, it was called a Burt Rutan design called the Defiant. Twin engine airplane. It had a pusher motor and a puller, a tractor motor. So it was a twin engine inline thrust canard airplane. It looked like a spaceship, and I thought it was the neatest thing I had ever seen. In fact, when we went there, my dad was taking me, and before we left the house, Mom said, "Hey, you're not flying it. You're going to look at it, right?" We're like, yeah, we're going to look at it. I promise. And we get there, and I go, "Come on, Dad, let's go. Let's go up in the air." And so, sure enough, you know how that story ended. Yeah, that story ended. And I remember we took off, and he says, "Okay, it's your airplane." And I looked at him. I said, "Well, I don't know what I'm doing." He goes, "Well, we're going to find out." And that was one of the most enjoyable memories I have is my first airplane flight. So that's probably why I ended up doing what I'm doing.
And how old were you at this time?
7th grade. So I think I was around 12 years old.
12 years old. So wow, can you imagine? Did you go back to school the day after and tell your kids, "Yeah, I was on an airplane.
Well, the worst part
Flying an
was, if
airplane.
you remember back in the day, you had to take film to Walgreens to get it developed. So I had to wait for the pictures to show my friends. But yeah, I brought the pictures with me everywhere. I had this little, actually, I still have the photo album upstairs. It's a little, 3x5 photo album. It has some of the flying pictures in it.
Oh.
And I love those pictures. I showed them to everybody.
Yeah. No, I used to work at a photo lab, as a matter of fact. I was the supervisor for a Costco 1-hour photo lab, and did that for many years. And, let me explain something to the younger viewers. Back in the day, before everyone had a smartphone, we had either fancy cameras, which are SLR 35 mil fancy camera, or we had a point and shoot camera before digital. And you had to put the film, physically load it in the camera, try not to expose it to too much sunlight, and make sure it was closed properly and it was winding appropriately. And some of the fancier point and shoots had auto load feature, which was wonderful. You didn't have to wind the camera after each shot. I've got a buttload of cameras here. I should have brought one down to explain this. And then at the end of the roll, usually that's 32 frames was a pretty good size roll.
Something like that, yeah.
Or 26 or 32 frames. So you would take this and you would have to buy the appropriate film for the lighting condition you were going to shoot in. If you were going to shoot indoors, you had to buy 400 ISO. And if you were outdoors, you'd get 100 ISO, which was a lot more higher resolution, but it needed more light. And you would go and you would take pictures. So you never took, or you tried to never take a bad shot, because you had to pay to have it developed. You had to pay to have the prints made. And if it was a bad shot, it's a wasted, negative or wasted frame, wasted money. So you didn't take as many pictures as you do now. Now we take 20 pictures of selfies and then delete 18 of them and keep 2, and then we can Photoshop them right there on our phone. And it doesn't cost us anything other than the fact that you have a phone. But yeah, back in the day, and you had to wait. You had to take the film into a photo lab. And if it was a 1-hour photo lab, you paid a little bit more. Or you had to, like you said, drop it off at Walgreens or any of the local drugstores, and they would send out your pictures. Most of them now, after some time, they had these labs right there in the store, because everybody became our photo labs after a while. But for the most part, before that happened, you'd have to mail it out and wait 4 days to get it back. And then, you go and you pay for them, and then there you are. Before you even leave the store, you open up the envelope and you're looking through. Okay, that's bad. That's bad. That's a good one. Oh, that's blurry. That's a good one. So yeah, $12 later, you might have, out of your 32 frame roll or whatever it was, you might have 4 good shots. And then you got to take that frame, that negative, back to the store and send it out again if you wanted reproductions or enlargements and things like that. So,
but you got the anticipation of like Christmas morning. I mean, you were always waiting to see how they turned out. Would you get a good one?
Yeah.
And when you did, it was fun.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so true. That's so very true. God, I forgot all about that. And to tell you the truth, all my SLRs that I still have to this day, none of them are digital. I don't use them. But
I sold mine.
Yeah. Did you really? Yeah.
I did. I regret it some days, but I sold mine when we were living in college. For rent.
Yeah. Well, you got to pay for flying lessons.
That's right.
But that's so cool that you were able to capture your very first experience in the airplane with some old, still frames of 35 mil pictures. And did you show them off at school, or how'd that go?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I carried them with me. I mean, I couldn't stop talking about it. The neat part is actually that the gentleman that took me for my first flight, he was my dentist, right? And his office was space shuttles and airplanes. And so that's how we always got to talking about airplanes. He's someone I hang out with regularly now. We have a Saturday morning breakfast here at the airport. And it's really neat that the gentleman who took me for my first airplane ride, someone who's a friend of mine now, see him regularly. So it's neat. It's a tight knit community, but it's, as you guys know, it's a small world. You could be anywhere in the country and run into someone you went to flight school with or flew with or worked with.
Yeah. Yeah, so
Still
true.
impresses me.
Yeah. Yeah, it is so very true. It is a very small world, very small community as well, once you start talking about aviation. So after that very first flight, did you immediately get into the airplane, start flight training, or how did that process work?
Well, at 12 years old, I didn't know much about, I didn't have any family in aviation or flying experience. So I got into radio controlled airplanes, built models and flew them. And, nowadays they have simulation and stuff. You can practice, but back then you would, spend weeks building an airplane and then take it out for the first flight and, crash it and learn the hard way. And then you'd have to rebuild it. So that's how I got into, they actually had tether airplanes. They had U-control, it was called, and you stood in the middle of a parking lot and the thing would fly in circles and you'd hold onto a string and you'd control the pitch with this little kite string. And we did that for hours. I mean, you'd get dizzy and your friend would go and then you'd crash that. But that's really how I itched that, that need to fly was through RC models and things like that.
It's funny you say that because recently on some of the social media out there, primarily Facebook, somebody had posted the World Championships of tethered airplane flying. And there's these three guys and they're going in circles and they all have these airplanes and they even have a pit crew. And
yeah,
it's so awesome to see.
Funny seeing a whole bunch of grown men spin in circles,
Yeah. And how do you not get dizzy when you're doing something like that?
Don't put a lot of gas in the airplane, because it runs out of fuel and that's when you're done with the flight or when you hit the ground. So if you just try to put enough fuel to have fun, and I don't know, I think people probably have techniques. Again, I was so little, I don't think you get dizzy when you're a kid. You just spin and spin. And
oh, that's so awesome.
I watch my 5-year-old spin in the living room and it's like, okay, you're making me feel sick,
Yeah. Well, and so you got into all the RC aircraft. What other RC airplanes did you have growing up?
Just basic trainers, and then you work your way up to more aerobatic airplanes, extra 300 and stuff like that. And of course, at some point, when you go to school, you get interested in girls, and RC airplanes sit on the shelf for a little bit. So, around, high school and stuff, that kind of went to the back shelf. But it's still a fun hobby. It's, I know a lot of people that still fly RC, I always enjoyed building things, obviously. And so if it's furniture or, an airplane model or something like that, working on the lawnmower or whatnot, I'm a mechanically minded person. That's what I enjoy doing.
So, here you are, a young man, all of a sudden you got the ladies being the number one thing taking your attention, and aviation got put aside almost immediately. What happened?
No, it's, I was a sophomore in high school in 2001, and we know what happened, in 2001. And that's really what sent me off the rails of becoming an airline pilot. Was I didn't know anybody in the industry. As you know, back before the internet the internet was around, but the resource that it is now it's immense now. You can go on forums, you could ask questions to real pilots who are in the industry now. Back then, if you didn't know anybody, you may get introduced to a pilot at Thanksgiving and you go, hey, I want to be a pilot. They're like, well, you should give up now. And you're like, okay, great. Thanks. But now we have an opportunity to interact with current pilots, retired pilots, people that have decided to leave the industry, people who have decided to get to the industry later, like me. I'm more of a second career guy than initial. But in 2001, after September 11th, as silly as it sounds, I was worried to become a pilot. It wasn't just a job security thing. I was legitimately nervous. I was like, boy, if this is the new world we live in, funny enough, starting the conversation today about the new normal. But that was another turning point where, when I used to ride on airplanes, the cockpit door was open. When I was real young, I was invited up to the cockpit in cruise, back when I was a kid. they would let you go up there and sit in the seat. I mean, it was really a whole different world. So I remember talking to my parents saying, I don't think I want to do this. I want to fly, but I don't think I can do this professionally. It's too scary of a world. And, when you're 16, 17, you don't know anything. You're still figuring life out.
What?
So I continued through high school, not really knowing what I wanted to do. And I started community college because I was like, if I don't know what I want to do and I'm putting myself through college, I better just get the general education out of the way. And so I went to community college, and then I stopped going for a little bit and just worked. I just wanted to save money and get my head wrapped around what I want to do with life. And that's what I did. And then enrolled in Western Illinois University, just got a management degree. I knew at that point, I started getting drawn back towards aviation. I knew at the time, I needed some 4-year degree. And again, funding college on my own, I was like, well, the first step is going somewhere, a state school I could afford. Let me get a management degree. That should be pretty universal. And then I got a music business degree as well, because I enjoyed, I played electric bass guitar, and I was a sound engineer at the time. And so, graduated college 2010, and in between, summer and winter breaks and jobs and things like that, I would fly anytime I could. I worked at the YMCA, and funny enough, that's where I met my wife. But the paychecks weren't impressive. I taught rock climbing. I drove a short bus for teen camp. I mean, it was, I loved my job, but it was just summer jobs. It was really, it was fun. So I would, get a paycheck, and I remember I would do the math. I'd get my paycheck, and I think it was like $250. We're getting paid $5 or $6 an hour. And I would go to two flight lessons. So I'd spend about $200 and leave enough money for gas to get to and from work. That's about my budgeting. It was, spend all the money I could to fly, and then
just enough for ramen and
McDonald's. Yeah.
So you mentioned that this is a second career for you. And anyone that's been listening to the show for a while knows that I've gone through the same thing. And I think that's why you and I meshed so well when we flew together at my final, especially for my final flight there at SandPiper, is because you and I have very similar backgrounds, very similar support structures at home. I too was working retail for a long time and making little money, and even when it got better and I made a career out of it, still that flying bug was always there, always itching. It was like a scratch in the middle of your back that you just can't get, and the only way to get it is to just drop what you're doing and just dive in cold turkey. Is that what happened to you? Did you just kind of finally, I know you mentioned you had some multiple jobs, the YMCA being one of the first ones, paying just enough into flight lessons so that you had enough to eat some ramen and put gas in the tanks to get to the airport. Trust me, a lot of aviators out there know the feeling of that experience. And of course, after 9/11, that did slow down a lot. But you kept going. You kept going at the GA flying. Talk us through that. What was that progression from the YMCA and flying a little bit to get your private on the side? How did that progress into further ratings?
Well, one of the things that I tell, a lot of local guys, they'll point new aviators towards me to help, give them someone to talk to when flight lessons aren't going well, or career advice. And I like to help people when I can, because I remember what it felt like when you don't really know the path. You're just, I didn't know anybody in aviation. I just showed up at the airport and persisted. So before I really got back into flying, before that YMCA story, I was out flying a radio controlled airplane, a quarter scale Piper Cub, big airplane, 105-inch wingspan, huge, Wow. And I happened to see a life-size Cub less than a mile away. So we packed up the car and we went chasing that Cub to find out where he was going. He landed at a local airport and I stopped him. He stopped at the fuel pumps and I said, "Hey, I just wanted to see your airplane." I said, "You got to see what I have in the car." And he goes, "Okay." And he went over and he said, "Well, that's my airplane, just quarter size." And I said, "Yeah, this is great. I love the Cub." He goes, "Cool, hop in." And so that was neat because now I'm, 20 years old. I know what's going on in the airplane. I've been around aviation. And that's the very next day, I went to the airport with cash in hand. I mean, it was like, yep, I'm starting now. So I graduate from college and I go work, a lot of my colleagues were having trouble finding jobs after 2008, right? Recessionary period. 2010 rolls around, we graduate. And a lot of people were unwilling to work. They're like, well, I can't find a marketing job. I can't find, my career field. And I'd said, well, I need a job. So I worked at Best Buy, electronics retailer. And because it was a paycheck, right? I didn't have a passion for TVs they had a music department. And that's why I was drawn to the Best Buy pathway. They had guitars and basses and drums. So that was kind of fun. I'm always make the best of your current situation sort of guy. So that I flew while I was at Best Buy, soloed the night before I got married. The day before I got married, I told my wife, or my soon-to-be wife, I said, "Hey, before we go on our honeymoon, I got to get this milestone." And so I did my first solo at a grass airport out here in Illinois called Cushing Field. Had a blast, and then was perfectly happy with being a private pilot. I joined a flying club and had a regular job and flew on the weekends, and I just kind of accepted that the airline career path was behind me. I was an old man at this point, being 24 or whatever. And so I progressed on a different career path. I worked at a casino, not in the traditional sense. I worked in the IT department, and I ran live concerts for them. So live musicians, live comedy acts, things like that. That was a really neat job. I'm a night person, so sort of like a cargo pilot. My clock works better from 3 p.m. to 3 a.m. than the other side of the clock. So I used to work second shift, and then ended up through a long series of random occurrences working for a sporting goods company here in Illinois. They sell athletic footwear and clothing. They sell sports team apparel and sports uniforms for baseball and softball. And that was great. I had the job, good paying job, really enjoyed the people I worked with. I thought to myself, this is success. This is it. And in the meantime, I had earned my flight instructor certificate. Now, a lot of people don't know this, so I'll give you the gouge, and I might get a little flack for this, but I only had my private when I got my certificate. How does that work?
Wait. You had only your private, and you were a flight instructor?
Yeah. So they came out in 2004 with the sport pilot flight instructor rating. Minimum requirement was 150 hours total time. And you have to pass the same oral, writtens, and flight test as a flight instructor. Mm-hmm. So you have to fly everything to commercial standards, essentially.
I see.
So I was nervous about it, but I was like, you know what? I want to start down the path of the airlines. I now have some money with a steady job. I was comfortable spending money on flying. And I said, well, if I can't make it to the airlines, let's at least go to the next step. And I could be around aviation more if I teach, and I could become a better pilot myself. So I sought out a local school that had light sport airplanes, and I asked him about it. He said, well, the instructor rating is no different than a normal instructor rating. So you need to know your stuff. Mm-hmm. So he hands me the Pilot Handbook of Aeronautical Knowledge, the PHAC, and all the other FAA publications. And I studied for a year and a half, and I would come in and teach ground school with him. And he would give me notes. First, I would observe him teaching ground school, and then I would start teaching the ground schools as they would cycle through the next, 8 weeks.
Yeah.
And then he would give me notes on when I taught ground school to improve my teaching. And then eventually I went and got my instructor rating, started doing intro flights, basic things, but I was only a primary instructor the entire time. So
Gotcha.
1,000 hours of dual is what I did over a period of 4 years. So I was part-time. I loved flying so much. I would go before work. At dawn, I'd meet a student or just fly by myself. And then after work, 5 to whenever the sun went down in the summertime.
Nice.
So one day the epiphany happened. We're sitting around this table and we're handing around fabric for the next women's leggings. And I sat there and go, what am I doing with my life? I'm not a clothing designer. I'm not interested in fabric. I mean, I had pride in my work. I wanted to do well, but I went home and reflected hard that day. I said, this is not what I imagined myself doing when I was 12. It was, yeah. And again, I mean, I'm so thankful for the people at that company that gave me opportunity, because who am I? I mean, the only reason I think I had a job there is because I had an attitude of, that's not focused on the roadblocks. How do we draw the path around the roadblocks? That's just a basic philosophy that I was taught from a very young age. Don't look at the roadblock, look around the roadblock. And how do you become an ATP? How do you become an airline pilot? It's the same thing. It's climbing a mountain. You don't think about the summit today. It's there, it's the big plan, but you just continue walking the path. If you could kick the soccer ball towards the goal, even an inch every day, you're closer to the goal.
Yeah. No, that's a wonderful analogy, because that is exactly what a journey in aviation to make it to a professional airline career is all about. You don't just go straight ahead, full blast. You're never going to make it, because, like you said, these roadblocks and obstacles will appear, and the trick is to strategize how you're going to get there for the long game, because this really is a long game, isn't it? Long game.
And I had a friend of mine, funny enough, his name's Tony as well. He called me last week. He had some surgery, and he goes, man, my check ride has to get rescheduled for 2 weeks. And I said, when you look back, 2 weeks is barely a blip on the radar.
Drop in the bucket.
I said, looking forward, it looks like the biggest hill you could climb. But looking back, you'll go, I don't even remember delaying my check ride 2 weeks, Yeah. And you're spending so much time and money. Why not enjoy the journey? I mean, literally, I said, you're spending more money than really you're ever going to spend on anything. You might as well enjoy the money you worked hard for, to get there. I mean, I get it. Seniority is everything. We hear all these anecdotal pieces of advice. But the truth is, it's okay to enjoy flight instructing. It's okay to enjoy time building and cross-country flying. We used to fly to Nashville, a friend of mine and I, in a Piper Archer from Chicago.
Oh, wow.
We used to fly to Nashville, have dinner, and then fly back to Chicago and do approaches on the way to Indy and Peoria and Champaign, and just had a blast. It was like road tripping with your friends, and you're like, this is what it's about. I get it. Like, getting it done in 6 months is great, but did you really, what's life about?
Yeah.
And I think that's where guys like you and I, where we've had some career experience, some successes, some failures, we go, you know what? If I don't make it to the next step, so be it. But I'm here right now. I might as well, put a smile on my face and enjoy this. Look out the window a little bit.
That's so true. And this industry really is all about networking and marketing and getting out there, making those connections. In the onset of this interview, you were talking about how, you came across people from your past. It's a small world. This industry is very small. You never know who you're going to run into, and that is built upon these experiences that we collect on our journey. It's really kind of a cliche to say it, but a lot of times it's the journey that is the end goal, not the destination. And this really could not be more exemplified than in aviation in this industry.
Well, to give an example, I know we're kind of skipping ahead of here a bit, but when we flew your last flight on the 145, to me, the upgrade was so far in the distance. And I remember when you said something along the lines of, as you walked out of the airplane for the last time, you said, boy, that's weird feeling knowing I'm not going to come back to this cockpit again as a pilot, you know? And you told me, you said it will happen fast. And sure enough, August 2019, I had that same experience. I had almost the same leg. I mean, it was Appleton to Chicago, not Madison to Chicago, but I had a great captain, and he actually allowed a friend of mine, a really good friend of mine who also works at the airline, to sit on the jump seat. I thought that was really cool.
That is cool.
Because he was a new first officer, and so they need to do an observation flight. So it allowed him to kind of two birds with one stone. But I remember landing at O'Hare on 9 left, and after the wheels touched down and the captain says, my aircraft, I go, that's the last time I'm going to fly this airplane, probably. You know, in the foreseeable future, that's probably the last time I'll fly that airplane.
Yeah.
And we got at the gate, and the captain said, hey, let's go outside and take a picture in front of the airplane. I'm like, oh yeah, cool. I was so kind of numb. You walk out of the airplane, and I went up the jet bridge, and I go, this is weird. Yeah. This is really weird. And it was bittersweet because I enjoyed that airplane, but I was also ready for the next step. But to your point, those moments come so fast. Boy, when I look back, that period of time where I was a first officer on the 145, it flew by. Looking forward, you go, man, I've got forever on this thing. But looking back, and you were there even longer than I was.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, I've got to say, you raised a very good point that it takes a little bit of effort to try to make certain milestones in your career memorable. I mean, they'll be memorable if you do nothing and you just go with the flow and, you know, keep moving forward, and that's fine. But you got to have a friend who was new to the airline observe your last leg as a first officer on the 145 for that company. And that just made it so much more special for the rest of your life. You're going to remember that. You know, I actually had a few experiences like that, but the one that comes to mind most recently is my very first leg at SandPiper was IOE. And back then you had to observe 2 legs with your check airman and a line FO. And then the line FO would go home for the rest of the trip, and nice, they got paid to go home as a displacement guarantee. And you would jump in the right seat, and then you would fly for that trip with the check airman. And that was your first experience in the actual airplane after having been certified in the simulator and type rated and everything out on the flight line. And it's very intimidating, and the first few legs are always a blur. But what made that nice was the fact that check airman and I stayed in touch with each other to this day. So here we are 16 years later, still communicating, still talk to each other. But when I came to mainline over here at Legacy, I had to do 4 observations, 2 domestic and 2 international because of my division. And while I was in ground school, he kept texting me, how did day 1 go? How did day 2 go? Do you have any questions? Here's what you need to study. So he has actually been somewhat of a mentor to me in my professional career. And he said to me over text, he sent me a message saying, hey, you got to do your international division. All month I'm doing Hawaii. It counts as international observation. Most people don't do Hawaii because it requires an overnight and you have to get permission from the chief pilot So here's the chief pilot's phone number in Los Angeles. Call him, tell him that you would like to do this. And once you get the okay, then call Quals, tell them that you got the okay from your chief pilot and you want to be put on this flight on this day. I'll be the FO. You can observe and we can go hang out in Hawaii. So my very first international experience into Hawaii was almost like a full circle, where my very first leg at a professional airline was with a Czech airman, Scott. He's a wonderful guy. And my very first experience in Hawaii was observing a flight where Scott was the FO here at Legacy. And I will never forget that experience. It just made it so much more a wonderful memory. And it was because it took a little effort, a little communication, a little, thinking outside of the box to get that. And, it sounds like you had a very similar experience, and I actually applaud you for that. That's wonderful to have that experience and that memory to last a lifetime.
What's fun, some of my advice I've given to some of the FOs that I fly, they'll go, well, hey, that wasn't your job to go, help along with those hockey bags or whatever else. And I always tell them, I say, you're right. But if there's two dots that are nearby and we could just connect them real easy, why not? And that's the sort of thing, you may need to connect a couple dots to make those memorable things happen. But what's neat is most of the people in our industry empathize with that. The chief pilots, the directors of flight, they all know that if, it's a father-son pairing or a daughter on a jump seat or a friend or a significant other. I've heard stories, even in our airline, a guy that was flying, he was more in your generation of pilot group.
Wait, what?
One of his last, yeah. What do you mean?
How are you talking about you? We were never.
I flew one of his last flights as well, and he got the opportunity to. Yeah, he said, "Hey, I got a really close friend that I would love to fly with me, not an airline pilot," and they made it happen. They made it happen on a Part 91 reposition flight. And I was so impressed. And he said, I never thought in a million years they would even consider it. But the answer wasn't no. The answer was, let's see what we can do. And they worked it out for him. So
this was at SandPiper?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I was floored. I was absolutely floored. It doesn't hurt to ask. Like you're in your scenario, you call the chief pilot. What's the worst that could happen? He says no.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes it just takes a little bit of courage to ask.
And tact. You can't go in with a bull.
I'll be riding in your jump seat today.
I tell you what. The best
my favorite
advice I have for new guys is you got to be the kind of person that just you enjoy things. If you're in line at the grocery store and you get frustrated, then you don't have the patience to do a lot of things, right? You got to be able to just. I was on an Amtrak train one time. We hit a family of deer. The front engine broke down. The back engine broke down. There was a fire and a flood, and it all happened on the same night. And people were losing their minds. And I just sat there and relaxed because guess what? We're in the middle of a blizzard on a railroad track in the middle of the country. What are we going to do?
And what can you do? Nothing.
You could play a card game. You could go, you get a cup of coffee. I don't know. Just you're on the journey.
You're on the journey. That's it. And if you treat aviation in a similar manner, you're golden.
Now I get it. I mean, commuting and all the stuff that can really pile up emotionally. Getting junior man, getting, called when you thought you were free. I get it. It's frustrating to some. But at the same time, when you have the contrast like you and I have of having a normal job, my phone was at my hip 24/7. I was on call all of the time. Sunday at 7 p.m. Hey, I need you to come out here. Okay. That was your job. So to me, I always have that perspective of, there's good and bad in all of life. So you just have to roll with it. And so when I get some sourpuss stuff going on. Even I get grumpy, right? I mean, it's human nature.
We all do.
So I had a crew that was upset because we were running behind and we had some mechanical and it was their last day. So I went in the terminal and bought every Kit Kat they had at the stand. And I gave everybody Kit Kats and said, all right, everybody get on the, here's some sugar to feel a little bit better. And, you could just see they crack a smile when you come back on the airplane. And okay, but we got the team back together. Now we're all pulling the cart in the same direction and let's just get this done. That's what I enjoy most about the job now is you can have an impact a little bit more when you're the captain than the FO on stuff like that. You could turn the crew around and they reflect your attitude typically.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a fun challenge for me, even if I'm grumpy. We land in Dallas and I was all grumpy one morning and I said, hey, I'm going to get coffee. What do you want? He goes, I don't drink coffee, but I'll drink whatever you want. I'm like, no. Like that's, I'm like, that's not.
Oh, my captain made me drink
an orange
this
juice.
black sludge.
Yeah.
All I
I'm
wanted.
like, was I that bad? He's like, I'm like, sorry, I'll do whatever you want.
Roger, have you had these kind of experiences with the captain forces you to drink coffee and you're like, no?
Fortunately, no. I'm not a coffee drinker. I'm one of the very few pilots out there that doesn't actually drink coffee. I haven't had. Well, that's also helped that from a captain standpoint, I didn't deal with that as long as you guys did because I got out of that world. But
no.
I was fortunate enough that I haven't had too many captains that have been too overbearing in that regard.
Yeah. It really does make a difference when you have a good attitude, a positive outlook, and this industry, the journey, it all kind of melds into an experience that at the end of the day, you can sleep good at night, just knowing that you're doing your part and you're treating people correctly and with respect. And I thank you for sharing that with us.
Sure.
Yeah. Now I wanted to kind of go back just a little bit, because we kind of jumped ahead. You decided to leave this job, this full-time job working for a company and decided to just jump feet first into aviation. And you ended up at a Part 141 flight school to get all your ratings. Now, you were already an instructor and a private pilot.
Already an instructor. And what ended up happening with the 141 flight school, I had interviewed for that job before I worked at the sporting goods company. And they called me to hire me the day after I accepted that job. And I told the person who was running the company at the time, they said, hey, we'd really like to have you. I said, I just accepted a job yesterday. And they said, you got to be kidding. I said, you know what? I said, I hate to do this to you, but I gave them my word I'd be starting this week. So I can't backpedal. As much as I want to be in aviation, I got to give the guy at least 2 years of my time. And I think that conversation is what allowed me to get the job in the future, because I kept in touch with that person via email or phone about every quarter, every 3-4 months. I'd say, hey, how's things going? And, down south where it's warm and not snowing, and they, we get a chuckle. But it was, when I called back, I said, it's time. I can't do women's leggings anymore. This is not me. I need to fly. The problem about the 141 school was I was driving a desk. I wasn't flying airplanes. I was hired to manage the school. And was neat because I had some experience now doing that. I had experience managing a team of people. I'm an operations-minded person, so I really enjoy getting my hands in, get them dirty, get in the operation, improve things, improve the quality of life for the employees. So I remember one of my first days, they send you down for a week of training, of boot camp. And then, you come back and there's very little guidance. It's sink or swim. It's baptism by fire. And all of this staff had not had a leader. They had temporary leaders throughout. So I was learning the politics and things of that sort. But I sat down all the flight instructors and said, look, I'm not just someone who's running the flight school. I'm a flight instructor. I understand, I understand the job. So I called HR and said, hey, how much can they had this really interesting pay system that you got paid different rates for the kind of flying you did. And I called HR and said, how much can I pay these flight instructors max? And I forgot what number they gave it. We'll call it, $35 an hour. And I said, okay. And she goes, why? I said, don't worry about it. And I sat everybody down and said, all right, everybody's getting paid the max pay right now. If you started yesterday, if you've been here for 20 years, everybody's max pay. And they go, okay. I said, every student that you teach, commercial, ground, private, whatever it is, multi, you're getting paid the same rate. They go, why? I said, well, because you're the same, you're worth it to me, whether you're training a private or doing an intro flight, and I need you to want to do any work we need to get done. And we turned that school around. We brought back a CFI academy program. It was a month-long academy program. I made a lot of, at that point I had been in aviation locally. So everybody told me why it wouldn't work. You can't do the CFI academy because Chicago's impossible to do check rides. You don't have housing. And I said, well, don't tell me what I don't have. And so I went out and put all the pieces together. I made relationships with the local flying club, said, hey, we could do your BFRs. If you don't want to, that's fine, but we'll put your airplanes on our insurance. That way, if you don't have a club instructor, we're here for you. I went to the other flight schools. They go, oh, did you secret shop the flight schools? I said, no, I took them out to lunch. You should know your competition. That's what we did in the other industry. I knew my competition. I knew the guys at Dick's Sporting Goods, right? Because you have to.
Yeah.
And I remember the big holdup was the FAA. They were very nervous about the FAA. So I called the head of the Great Lakes FAA and said, I'd like to set up a meeting. And he goes, who are you? And I said, well, I'm trying to do this flight instructor academy, and I want to talk to the people that are going to administer the test from the FAA. He said, great. Here's their boss, and here are their names. So I went in and said, hey, guys, I want you to be a part of educating these instructors. And they're like, wait, what? I said, I want to open our doors. I said, I know everybody's afraid of the FAA. And look, if you find something, we're going to deal with the paperwork, I'm sure. But instead of them showing up to you nervous, I want them to have some FaceTime with you. I want you to teach a 4-hour classroom session. I want to have an open Q&A so that our instructors have met you before and they understand your expectations before the check ride. So all of a sudden, we're outperforming the best schools in the country of this 141 group of schools. And that's when I learned the lesson of you have to be careful how you do things. Because I thought, well, success is success. But no, what happens is you end up, you can step on toes by accident by making it successful. And again, I'm looking out the window at an airport and I'm watching everybody else fly airplanes. And I'm here, again, fulfilling job, enjoying it, but I'm 3 inches closer to aviation than I was, but I still have that barrier. I'm not in the seat of an airplane. And it was going to be a pay cut, but that's when I had the conversation with my wife. And thank God she was understanding, because she said, look, our first child's due soon, within 6 months. She's like, you quitting your job and going to be an hourly flight instructor is going to be a tough one. She was a school teacher at the time. She said, this decision only gets more difficult the older you get and the farther down the road we get with kids and house and all the details. It just carries more weight, right? You become less flexible with shifting careers and things of that sort. So I quit that job and full-time flight instructor, worked for a local flight school, a different airport. And every single day of the week, 7 days a week, I taught. And when I needed a break, I took a break. Good thing in Chicago is in December, you always get a 10-day break because the weather's terrible.
Whether you like it or not.
Whether you like it or not, icing's a thing.
Yeah. So that's really kind of a non-standard way of going about this. It's not like you just said, hey, I want to be a pilot. I'm going to go to college to go to an aviation school, and I'm going to take flight lessons, and then I'm going to become an instructor, and then after that I'm going to start applying. And I mean, your journey really is relatively unique to the extent that it had, I'd say, a little bit more detours in it than a standard aviation career path. But with that, you really gained a knowledge and experience that has really helped you propel into success.
Well, think about it this way. I mean, you're picking up other skills that benefit you in our career, but also being around a 141 school, I understood that syllabus up and down. I didn't teach there as a flight instructor, though. We had really nice flight simulators. So I had, and in my opinion, we had excellent flight instructors, very experienced flight instructors. So I had access to these guys who had experience with instrument flying, multi-engine flying, commercial flying. So guys who had experience flying King Airs and Falcons and Challengers. So every day I got to go to work, and so I did move the ball down the field. I was at the airport every day for work and around people that had done it. And so now when I'm working on my instrument, I'm getting to squeeze all this knowledge out of these very experienced people. And these guys, it'd be a cloudy day, and as long as it wasn't too cold in Chicago, we'd get a fall, low overcast day. All these guys were comfortable taking me up in actual conditions. So here I am with some of the most experienced instrument pilots, and we're flying airplanes that don't have automation. They're round dial Cessnas. And I'm getting real actual experience in Chicago with Chicago controllers. That was so valuable to me. And I mean, I get it. Speed is good because you want to have this career, when you're at where you want to be, you want the most amount of time there. I get it. But to me, boy, the journey was fun. And I kept just going down the path. I was paying for it myself, so I'd fly here and there still. And boy, I got some great experience. When I took my instrument check ride, I'd been out with Chicago Control so much that it was it didn't feel like a check ride. It was just
that was easy.
Just another flight.
Another flight. In fact, I had to file because of my written test was going to expire. I started taking my written test at the beginning of all of my certificates. The private, I waited till late, like a lot of guys do. Mm-hmm. And the advice I got was, hey, take it right at the get-go. Then it's done. That barrier is done. Then you can go learn the practical knowledge. And it was going to expire, and the examiner said, hey, we had rescheduled 2 or 3 times at that point. And she said, hey, it's my discretion, and I know you because we had sent her plenty of students. She said, if I'm allowed to do it in actual conditions, instrument conditions, but it's on me if we screw up. I said, well, that's your decision. And so we flew. Now, it wasn't a solid overcast day. It was scattered, but it was like a 1,200 foot layer. So I'm doing holds, and I'm on with Chicago Center. And what was nice about that is that's that's instrument flying. I mean, in the busiest airspace in the country, arguably. I mean, obviously New York and LA, but boy, what great to lead up to that point. I didn't feel like I was inadequate when I earned that certificate, the rating, the instrument rating. It felt like, I could do this. I could do this single pilot.
It's a huge difference from flying, say, in an area like Florida or Arizona, where you're going to one of these flight schools, because, they have good weather, maybe 300 out of 365 days out of the year. And so everything you're doing is going to be sunshine and rainbows, and you're going to be under a hood to do your practice approaches and all that. And here you are in the real deal.
That's not, I don't view that as a weakness or I don't view that as a detriment. I just thought that was neat that it was an experience I was able to get, because I think, to tell you the truth, I wanted to go to UND or Embry-Riddle. I thought the coolest thing would be go to an aviation school, and while you're at school, you get to study something you actually want to learn about.
Yeah. No, but to the point of, like, I went to a school primarily in Arizona, and sure, I did a few actual instrument approaches, because on those days when they do happen, everybody flocks to the airport and says, "Oh, I want to file a flight plan." And Roger and I were very fortunate to be at an airport that was south of the Phoenix Sky Harbor airspace. So you could depart, as long as you could depart VFR, you could depart and fly south and then get on with Albuquerque Center and file an IFR flight plan in the air, because you would never get one cleared on the ground with Phoenix Tracon.
Got it.
And then you could go and do an ILS in actual IMC, or a VOR approach in actual IMC over at Casa Grande, which was south of the Phoenix airspace, all day, all night. And you could actually file and log IFR conditions. And the benefit from that I saw was, sure, I could do it under the hood. That didn't make my abilities any less capable, didn't make me less capable. But when I finally got that stamp of approval and I got my license, and now I'm out there flighting in real IMC, because now I'm licensed and rated and by myself, it's not a big deal. That nervousness, that anticipation of, oh crap, this is the real deal, it's lessened, because you've actually experienced it. Not that it makes you a better pilot, but it makes you a more experienced pilot. And if that brings your nerves down, if that allows you to kind of slow everything down in your mind, and now it's not a big deal, I think that's a huge benefit.
And I actually even took that a step farther when I was flight instructing out of Arizona, because of that difference between... There is a difference between flying under the hood and flying in actual conditions. I don't think that there's really too much argument about that. I would actually look for, because being from California, being from San Diego, I would look for the days when it was overcast all the way on the coast in California, in the San Diego area. And because one of the things that you had to do as part of the instrument was that long cross country, I would try and couple that cross-country flight with a day where we were going to actually have to shoot an actual ILS and actual IMC conditions. Now, we had to fly for 5 hours to get there.
A couple stops along the way.
But I thought that experience was so valuable, and these guys were trying to build time because they're getting their, doing their instrument, and they got to do this cross country, and because it is such a big difference. And even actually some of them, I remember one guy trying to intercept and flying along the localizer when we were going into Montgomery, into San Diego, and we were in a 45-degree bank. He had never actually flown in a cloud. And here he was trying to track a localizer straight and level, and we are in a 45-degree bank.
You're right.
It's just so that it's so different. And like I say, I actually took it kind of probably to a little bit of an extreme looking back on it. It seemed like a good idea at the time.
Sure.
But, I in relation to what you guys are talking about in terms of that kind of operation, there is definitely a difference. And I had to take it to an extreme to try and get that for them to build that experience as well.
Yeah, I think, was it with you or maybe one of our shared students that we had at the time that I think you're the one that told me about this strategy, and I flew into Bakersfield, California from Phoenix.
Did you?
And it was half mile.
You probably went in the wintertime where you had the Central Valley fog that rolls in. And
yep.
You'll come down and you probably be over it at 1,000 feet. And then all of a sudden, when you're trying to get down to the ground, there's nothing.
Yeah. That Thule fog or ground fog, what do they call it? Yeah. And it would burn off usually by late afternoon, but
it would kind of lift.
Yeah.
And then at night it would come back down. And a lot of it's that radiation fog that would sit in the Central Valley.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember doing that with students. I'm like, you can take your hood off now. I'm like, oh, really? And they take the hood off and they go, oh. And you're like, just
put it back on.
Keep doing what you're doing. I actually had a student that did that one time. Over in Arizona, we were doing VOR approaches with higher minimums into Casa Grande, and they took the hood off, and they're like, "Oh, this is great." I'm like, "If it's too much, put the hood back on. You've been doing it with the hood now for weeks, and you've been doing it flawlessly. If you want to put the hood back on, go ahead, but this is what it looks like. He's like, yeah, these visuals are making me dizzy. And I'm like, what is this called? This is spatial disorientation. Very good. Here's a lesson.
That's funny. You go ahead and take your hood off. And now that you've taken the hood off, do whatever you can to put your head down and stare at the instruments right in front of you and not see anything that's outside.
We're going to have more with Captain Tony and his amazing journey right after the listen to the podcast there?
I do. I'll not as much as I should.
He's like, we recorded that, didn't you? What did you think? I haven't listened to it yet.
You don't know what it is. Listening to music.
What were we talking about?
That guy that one time, that place in that airplane. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I remember that one.
Oh, okay. Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back from the break. Well, look who just decided to join us in for this wonderful episode 62 of Squawk Ident. He had a little bit of an adventure this morning, some last minute errands that absolutely had to happen, and we're going to let him kind of give us the intel on that. Also joining us on today's flight is another superb Squawk Ident co-host. He has expressed his desire to instigate tomfoolery and shenanigans for the show today. He is a former international and professional racquetball champion, a member of the 9G Club, an AMP, an avionics tech, and an RC aircraft commander. He's a pickleball master, a commercial drone operator, and currently a 737 pilot for Legacy Airlines, the name we use here on the show as an alias to our employer, a U.S. mainline carrier. From his fortress of isolation from somewhere in Flower Mound, Texas, please help me in welcoming back to the show, Mr. Rob D. Rob, how the hell are you?
Hey, man. How you doing, Tony? I'm doing great. How's it going?
I'm doing well. So, we originally were going to start relatively early this morning, a little earlier than we usually start. And at the last second, I got a text message from Rob saying, hey, I'm heading out to the hospital. I'll be right back. Yeah. I'm like, what?
Yep.
What happened?
And those text messages to you were in real time, too. So basically, my daughter started to feel a little bit ill on Saturday. And this time of year, she starts getting like allergies really bad. It kind of runs in the family anyway. So sniffles, like the mucus stuff coming out and, the cough because of the nasal drain and all that stuff. So anyways, we kept her home. I mean, obviously she was home Saturday, laid in bed all day. Sunday, a little more active, but, pretty much kept her in her room. And then Monday she stayed home from school, but she was feeling a lot better. And so we're like, okay, we'll send her to school today. So as soon as she gets to school, the nurse is like, hey, Jordan's got symptoms, so we're going to have to send her home. So I'm like, oh crap, here we go. So following the district's protocol, they got to go get checked out by a doctor, and then if it's not COVID, they have to give us the reason what it is, and then if it is COVID, you got to quarantine for I think 10 days, and if it's not COVID, then you just gotta be like 24 hours from the last time you actually felt well till you can go back to school, something like that. So that's the reason why we sent her to school today, because yesterday, I mean, kept her home, but she was fine. Yeah. We had to like calm her down. I'm like, relax, you'll be able to go back to school tomorrow. Everything's fine. So anyway, brought her in, got her checked out. So they did the rapid test and the PCR test, I think it's called. Uh-huh. So the rapid test came back negative. So we're pretty happy about that. And we'll get the PCR test on Thursday.
Oh, okay.
So do they think it's just allergies or?
It's definitely allergies. I mean, that's what the doctor said. And she has a long history of having allergies and this kind of stuff this time of year already. But because obviously the state of the country and everything, and they gotta test her just to rule out the COVID thing. So, and it's understandable, but
Sure.
That's the world we live in. So she's home for next couple days and doing her schooling online.
Yeah.
Well, that's all understandable, but great for you guys that it's.
Yeah.
Sounds like good news.
Negative.
Well,
all right.
I'm glad that everything is well with your daughter.
Thank you.
I know that can be a little scary, especially now in this current climate that we're in. So let's get back to it. Tony, you've shared some wonderful stories on your journey in aviation thus far, all the challenges and roadblocks, your non-standard, non-typical flight path, to say that you didn't just go to a flight school and only work on aviation studies and only do flight instructing, and as soon as you had enough time, boom, you went out there and got a job. Not that there's anything wrong with that. That is a streamlined path. That's a wonderful path to take to get into the industry. But as you mentioned, sometimes it's not all about getting there quick. Sometimes you can take advantage of having these twists and turns in your career path, because you actually can develop and learn a lot from the different roles and the different jobs that you had on your way to where you are now. So speaking of where you are now, how did that transition come about from going from being a flight instructor, flying full time, finally getting your chance to fly 5, 6, 7 days a week, being in the air, being in the airplane, to, okay, I think it's time for me to go and get a job at a starting point in a professional airline career at a regional airline? How did that come about?
So like I was saying, a friend of mine was a flight instructor, and I was actually the one that sent his career paperwork in to the airline. And he enjoyed working. He said, it's, my big thing was, are the people we're going to work with a good group of people? Because we all do a similar job. And he said, the people are great. And so, here we are, I'm a flight instructor. I made this grid, and every flight I flew after work, I would try to check as many boxes as I could. So if it could be a night cross country, hood flight, I would do it. And just like I said, we'd fly. My buddy and I would fly to Nashville, have dinner in an Archer out of Chicago, and then fly back. And just, we did, we'd airport hop the whole way there and the whole way back, and only stop really when we needed to get a cup of coffee or fuel. And so I'm looking at my logbook going, well, man, I meet the restricted ATP minimums. He's enjoying work. I'll put my application together. So I had a less than a 6-month-old with me sitting on my lap as I'm applying to an airline. Nervous as could be, because you're going, man, what am I doing? This is crazy. But I said, well, my attitude's always, if you don't need to think about cross the bridge till you're there. I mean, if they don't offer you a job, then you're no worse off than you are right now. They're going to buy you an airplane ticket down there. They're going to put you up in a hotel, and the worst that could happen is you're right where you're at. So I remember I was short on the multi time before the interview. I'd been talking to recruitment. Of course, they're very excited to have you, right? So they want to get you down there quick. And my thing was, I wanted to have all the requirements in my logbook so that if they offered me a job, I could say, you got it, I'm ready. So I needed like 13 hours of multi-engine time. And I remember I went to the FBO and I said, I need 13 hours of multi-engine time in the next 3 days. And I said, I need to do it by myself because I can't afford to pay an instructor. And the best customer service, she goes, no problem. She goes, we blocked the airplane off for you for the next 3 days. Fly it as much as you want. And I said, here's 2 credit cards. When one runs out, start on the next one. Don't tell me I'm going to just make it happen. And she goes, of course, because I mean, God, I think the airplane's $400 an hour, or something like that. Oh, so I just, wow. The day before my interview, the logbook met the requirements. I went above an hour just in case, and went to the interview. I think there was 12 people, in in the room, and they took us for 3 different interviews. There was an HR interview, and the technical interview. And then there was a third, which I wasn't really clear on what it was, but so we're sitting there, they give us lunch. They're taking us one by one, taking our logbooks. And I'm looking around the room. There's guys from other airlines. There's military guys with, fighter jet experience. And there was a guy, he flew the B-2 bomber. And I'm going, who am I? Who am I? This guy, flew top secret stuff. And I flew, 100 horsepower airplane, 1,000 hours. So, but, I went in, talked with HR. That was a typical interview. And I immediately I stopped. The nerves went away when I realized it was pilots giving the interview, because now you're talking to your peers versus just some really well-practiced HR manager. It's a pilot. It's the guys you're going to fly with and girls you're going to fly with. So that all of a sudden I'm relaxed. We're having fun. Technical interview goes by. I think I didn't have to fly the sim because I was current. I think if you weren't current with instruments, you'd have to fly the Baron sim. And I remember the very last interview, we sat down with a guy in a very official looking office, and he goes, "Do you like instructing?" And I was like, "Yeah, I mean, I enjoy it, He goes, "Well, I mean, it's probably something you should, think about doing for a little bit longer." I'm like, "Oh, okay." Ouch. And I was like, he goes, "I'm just kidding. Here's your offer letter." And we're rolling on the floor laughing. And I was like, "Oh my God." He goes, "Yeah." He goes, "No, this, you'll enjoy it. He told me, he goes, "We're looking for people that we want to sit in a small confined box for 8 hours at a time. That's our job. You could be, I don't want to say a subpar pilot, but they know we all have met the bar of being a pilot. They want to know, can they stand you for 20 minutes or an hour or 4 hours?
It's funny. I've been doing this podcast for over a year now. And, I've been very fortunate to have some wonderful co-hosts here, and been extremely grateful to have the opportunity to interview, just countless guests. Everybody says the same thing. It's all about, at the end of a trip, am I going to kill you or want to kill you? Or are we all going to get along and everyone's going to be, professional, mature, and decent? And really, it goes beyond aviation. In this world, if you're treat others with respect, you follow that golden rule that we, as growing up, heard all about, and we haven't heard for in a long time, or heard about in a long time. That is really the meat and potatoes of what employers are looking for. Are you
and don't be afraid to show them your personality, right? I mean, they ask the generic question, something like, "Tell us your weaknesses," or "Tell us a time when you were frustrated." And I go, "Well, what do you have me here for? Let me call my wife, get her on the phone, and she'll tell you." And of course they start laughing, and don't be afraid to show them your personality a little bit, because if it's sterile, and I mean, you're in a suit, right? So you're nervous and you're trying to make a good impression, but it's okay. I mean, to show them who you are on these interviews.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah. And the interview is just that. It's not you're not there under a spotlight, and they're not saying, "Where were you on December 15th at 4 p.m.?" It's just, they want to get to know you. And so let your hair down. Yeah, absolutely. So the interview went well for you then, obviously.
Yeah. Well, I think 8 of the 12 guys got job offers that day. Oh. A few of them were, they have a pipeline of instructor programs. So you're not qualified yet, but you're in the hiring line. They interviewed a couple of those guys as well that were, sort of in the pipeline. But it was a positive experience. It took a long time. It was like 8 hours of sitting in a room, having sandwiches, waiting to get your number called, so to speak.
Yeah.
Very fair. Of course, I prepared for the interview probably more than I had to, but I went home feeling like I had won something. I was so proud that throwing the dice on that day where I talked to my wife and said, "Okay, if I'm going for it, I'm going in one direction and it's towards that goal." That felt like I won. Now we talked earlier about it's kind of neat if you can connect the dots and make these memorable moments. So my flight back to Chicago wasn't scheduled for till 5 or 6 p.m. So a friend of mine who flies for the legacy carrier said, "Hey, how's the interview going?" I said, "Oh, it went great. I got the letter. I'm, pending whatever, they have a meeting every week, approval. I'm going to start training." And he goes, "Hey, I'm at recurrent training. Come on over to the training center. Let's go poke our heads. I'll show you the sim building. I'll show you." Oh, so now I'm like on cloud 9. I'm walking around,
That's so cool.
Proud as could be. He's grabbing people out of classrooms. This guy just got hired, and the thing that struck me about our industry is everybody who came out of their class, they're all recurrent, right? They're all stoic and professional. They break that immediately and go, "Oh, cool." And they shake your hand.
Sweet.
And they remember what that's like to be excited. Your first job hired, your first type rating, any of that. Yeah. And isn't that cool? You could run into someone you've never met before. 9 times out of 10, they'd be, totally excited for you.
Instant bond. Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah, because they experienced it themselves. They know how exciting it is, and to meet somebody going through that it's a pleasure.
Yeah.
And you're the only one that could you can't buy that. I mean, you have to earn it. So it feels good. It's one of the few things in life nowadays that you have to really, go out and earn. You're probably going to make it through high school. You're probably going to make it through a 4-year degree, but you have to do the check rides yourself. You have to do the work. You have to do the, the applications even are a project.
Yeah.
Go through the logbook. All my logbooks are still paper. So that's like, how many night, cross-country instrument hours do you have in a Skyhawk? Great.
I forgot my abacus. Hold on.
There's one. There's 2. There's 3.
And for you, I think it was extra special because, like we mentioned earlier, you started flying, in college, relatively young age, in the early 2010, 2009, somewhere around there, right? And
2007, yeah.
2007. So it took a decade.
10 years. Yeah.
Yeah, a decade of training, a decade of teaching and learning, and all in that time. And congratulations. Welcome aboard. Right. You're now an employee at SandPiper Regional Airlines.
Right.
And we flew together when you were on the flight line not very long. And back then we had hardline bidding. And for those that may not understand what hardline bidding is, now most airlines have adopted a software program called PBS, or Preferential Bidding System, in which you would log on to the internet and you'd go into this program and you would put in what your preferences are. You can either bid for trips specifically, and you have all these multi-layers, and like, okay, start at layer number 1. What's my dream schedule for next month? And all the way down to layer 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, depending on your company's program. And then at the bottom layer, you would put, okay, just give me anything. I don't care, weekends, nights, whatever, red eyes. I just, avoid reserve. Or if you might get reserve, say, okay, well, instead of long call reserve, maybe I want short call reserve. That's what PBS is. Before most of the companies went to PBS, a lot of them still did what they called hardline bidding. Every month, you'd go into the crew room, and on a table, there would be a bid packet. A packet of all the flying for the month. And they were lines. And you would have, depending on your base and your equipment, you'd have, say, 100 lines. And so the very first person in seniority really only had to bid 1 line because they were number 1 on the seniority list. But if you're number 100, then you would have to bid 100 lines minimum in order to get something. And you would put them in order by preference. So for junior pilots, that would take quite some time to go through the bid packet and try to figure out what your preferences are in order. And I actually had a spreadsheet that I had on Excel on my laptop. And while I was commuting back and forth, I would go through and put them in order and verify that I had, not fat fingered a line. Because of course, when you do that, the one that you didn't mean to put in there is the one you're going to get. So we had a hard line at the time when I was working there with Tony, and we flew together for an entire month because of that. We got along great, hit it off. He was I remember him telling me about his experience going through new hire training and everything. And at the end of that month, I remember telling him, "Hey, man, I hope to fly with you again. This has been great." And what was it, about a month or two later, we flew together on a sequence. That was my final trip at SandPiper before getting the illustrious flow through to the mainline carrier. So at that time, I about almost 13 years in with SandPiper, a pretty senior pilot. I think close to 11,000 hours on the Embraer 145. And Tony had been there about a year and a half, I think, almost 2 years.
Almost a year.
Almost a year. Yeah. So we flew together, took a lot of photos, and no, there was no water cannon because it wasn't a retirement flight. It was just the final flight. And I've got to say, it was very memorable. I still have those photos on the cloud in my phone, and every once in a while I look back, and we had our flight attendant was real cool too, Hannah, I remember. And we did a pretty cool trip together. I think I've mentioned it before in the show, where that very last leg was a short hop, Madison to Chicago. I don't think we ever got above 11,000 feet. And I hand flew the whole thing because that's why I'm here to fly airplanes, folks. Those takeoff and cruise and land buttons are great buttons, but every once in a while, you just got to hand fly the airplane and remind yourself that whether it's a Cessna 172, a Piper Arrow, or an Embraer 145, they're all airplanes. So Tony, I thank you for that experience. But after I left, you continued on your journey, and it only took, 2.5 years before you got the call? The upgrade.
Yeah, as you guys were leaving, they couldn't operate the flights. They didn't have the captains. I mean, it was getting tight. So they started displacing first officers to captain. So it was either pick where you want to go or you will be put there. And I chose to put my preference in. So I got, the base and equipment that I preferred versus being just placed somewhere in the system where needed. And that's the route I took because I figured, if it's gonna get to this point, I might as well, we know what's happening. Let's just prepare for it. And I think you might have even been the person who gave me this advice, but the first 300 hours, you're trying to catch up to the airplane. The 300 to 700 hour mark, you just get really good at being a first officer. That's your whole goal in life, is just be a good first officer. And then 700 hours to 1,000 hours was like, I better participate in all the captain decisions that all the captains I fly with. And I would ask them, hey, if we have a write-up, can I help you? Or can I participate? And most of them are like, yeah, here, take the ball. Go for it.
Can you sign my name?
And fortunately, I was able to fly with a lot of people that had flown at the airline for 10 or 20 or 30 years. So you have people that are so well versed with this stuff. The stories, the experience, it was fun. It was like every time I used to get nervous when I'd see a 400 level captain. I'm like, oh man, number 400, he's got to be crotchety and upset. And no, they were characters. That's what I call them. I could count on one hand, real difficult flights where just, the personalities didn't mesh. And that happens, right? But really, everyone, it's what you make of it, right? And you just work with whoever you're working with that week and you learn a lot. And so captain school wasn't a huge surprise because I'd been reading the books. On overnights and it's coming, so you got to prep somehow. The hardest decision I had to make was, do I switch fleets or not? The smart decision, I asked a lot of people that I respect what they thought. And the hardest decision was, I have the most experience in the current airplane I'm in, but it's an airplane that's being phased out. So, we're always trying to determine the quality of life equation, right? Are you in base? Do you have seniority on fleet in base? Do you, so on and so forth. So that same friend that got me interested in the airline moved fleets. And he said, he's a Czech airman actually now on that fleet, the 175. And he said, I tell you what, I think you'll enjoy it, and it's a growing fleet. And I said, you know what? If that's the future where we're going, I'll hop on board. And I thought, long-term training, a lot of people look poorly upon, but I kind of thought, well, it's a new seat and new equipment. Probably wouldn't hurt to have a little extra couple days to get yourself, studied up. And sure enough, after you do it the first time, a type rating, I mean, you could attest this, guys. You've all had multiple type ratings. You know what to expect now. You know how you learn best. So you know how to study. And you just, where you have to meet the schoolhouse, and
right.
And if you do that, you'll be successful. And so that's what I did. I just studied hard. Fortunately, I had a great sim partner. And what was kind of neat is they changed the pay to when it was awarded, you got the captain upgrade pay.
Oh,
so that was like the golden ticket, because now
entice people to upgrade.
I'm bidding the schedule I want to bid at captain pay, overtime too.
Sweet.
Wow.
That was kind of, and at the time I was a big fan of 3-day trips. We have 4 and 3-day trips typically. Mm-hmm. And the 3-day trips, you worked about the same amount of hours, but you just worked most of the day. And I'm
more
like,
efficient. Yeah.
You get an extra day off at home. That's worth working harder while you're, at work. So for me, and I live in base, so when I'm home, I'm like, man, that's, and then trip trading is beautiful because you got more flexibility with a 3-day trip. So, but it was exciting. But also that day, I remember in July when I got it awarded, I went to training in September. So that's how backlogged they were in the training department. Awarded in July and went to training in September. But boy, it went by fast. And now went to my first recurrent on the 175. And funny enough, I don't think any of you guys have flown the 175, but it's the same airplane as the 145. It's just newer.
Yeah. Yeah. Rob was actually a check airman, right? On the 175.
Yeah. I was a check airman on the 175. I was going to ask, did they move all the training down to Dallas, or are they still doing it at Flight Safety in St. Louis?
They do both.
Okay.
I actually trained in Charlotte.
Oh, okay. Wow.
We're using a simulator.
The 190 sim or the 175 sim out there. Yeah.
And cool. So that a lot of great, it was a different crowd that taught the ground school. The 145 was pretty intimidating. And I think it was because it was my first type rating, but I remember we'd walk into the training session and it was, you'd get beat up a little bit and you'd go home and you go, yeah, maybe I should apply for another job.
Yeah. SandPiper training, baby.
Yeah.
But this was a different world, and maybe it's because the captain upgrade, maybe they kind of treat you more like a peer versus a subordinate, but it felt like they were talking with you, not at you. I mean, they were giving you advice, and it was probably some of the best training that I've gone through yet. But it's just, you realize, I mean, the things that were important to you in an airplane before, I mean, gosh, I just want the air conditioning to work. I just, I want it to be comfortable. I don't mind where we fly. I don't mind, it's a great airplane, but I still, if they said, hey, Tony, sorry, we changed gears, you need to be a 145 captain, I do it in a heartbeat. I enjoyed flying that airplane too. So, it's not like I needed to go to this airplane. Beautiful airplane. I mean, they're all brand new. You get in them and you look at the hour cycles and you're like, 70 hours. Holy cow. This is like, it has that new car smell.
Absolutely.
The knobs are still tight. I mean, there's not peanuts on the floor. I mean, it's beautiful.
Yeah. And the passengers really enjoy that as well. The new airplanes and the ability to bring in the carry-on. It makes a big difference.
Well, and the seating, it's so comfortable, even compared to legacy stuff. There's no middle seat. It's from a customer service standpoint, boy, it's comfortable back there. Look at that. Yeah. I like it.
Yeah, we got the 145 behind me and the 175. For those of you listening or watching on YouTube,
and you won't get me to badmouth the 145. I won't do it.
I like the 145. I thought that was a fun plane to fly, and that thing could, sling ice and go through turbulence and, come out the other end smiling,
Yep. Yep.
And the 175, the same thing,
Yeah.
It was a reliable bird and it was safe. And, talk about a great first airplane, Tony was one of the guys that, since I was still 8 months into the job, I typically, flying on reserve, on a 2-leg day, the first officer would fly the return leg to the hub. So I was, really well versed at the fight, arrival and O'Hare, because that's all I flew. And he goes, "Hey, do you want to fly the outstation?" I'm like, "What? Sure. What's the protocol?" And he gave me the bullet points and the benchmarks to hit. And he goes, "You could disconnect the autopilot, And I said, "Oh, I'd love to. I just, no one was a lot of the captains I flew with at the time, you're a new jet pilot. They're uncomfortable with it. Tony had been an instructor for 5 years, I think, or something like that. I said, no, I want you to disconnect it out of 18 and I want you to fly it in, Moline.
Let's have some fun."
All of a sudden, okay, I'm still an instrument pilot. I can still put it together. Cool. Even now I take that with a lot of the new guys. We have auto throttles and it still cracks me up. These guys, "Hey, so since you're a 145 guy, can I shut the auto throttles off?" I go ahead. Okay. So like at 1,000 feet, no. I'm like, just shut them off through 18. That's fine. And so they get their shoulders all high and they reach over and they click it and they go, "Oh my God, I'm doing it." And, nothing's changed. We're just in the same place. This is so awesome. And it's fun to have those moments where you'll let the guy, give him a little rope and, sure enough, they go, "Well, that wasn't that bad." I said, "Well, you're still a pilot. If we're getting slow, you're going to do something. You're going to push the yoke forward. You're going to push the power up."
Yeah.
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 But it's funny how the people you fly with, particularly in this case, since you were a check airman, we had a lot of conversations about things I didn't know about or technique and that translates through to the people I fly with now. So you have to remember when you're sitting there flying in the left seat, it's not two pilots in the room. You're helping each other out. And a lot of times, since I changed fleets, I'd ask the first officer, "Hey, you got more experience on this thing. How would you do it?" And they'll tell you, they love that.
Yeah. Yeah. And awesome. Even to this day, I fly with captains, mainline 20, 25 years flying narrow, even wide body airplanes, international experiences, flying into places that I only dream of going someday. And here they are now on this aircraft, on this fleet as a captain. And they still every once in a while go, "Oh, I didn't know that. You just taught me something. My FO taught me something today." And it's not a big deal. It's just, it's nice to kind of hear that because they all get excited. It's like the day I stop learning is the day I've got to really be careful and maybe think about retiring. Because if you're not paying attention, learning, maybe trying something new, a new technique, as long as you're within the SOPs and you're flying safe and you're not doing something stupid, really, that is how you grow in this industry. We learn, we pay attention to incidences and accidents that happen by reading these accident reports. Not that we're sitting there chasing fire trucks, but we're doing that so that if that ever were to happen to us, that we kind of understand what a course of action that may have worked and maybe a course of action that didn't work, so that we can make better assessments and better judgments. And thank you for mentioning that. That is something that I was very cognizant of. To hey man, we're still in an airplane. Let's fly this thing. So and it's a little different when you're an FO. You can ask the captain, "Hey, do you feel comfortable with that?" Some captains like, "Well, when it's your leg, you do whatever you want. If I see something bad, I'll speak up." But and those are a pleasure to fly with. And then there are those sometimes that you fly with, and they're like, "Well, this is for me. This is an Airbus. You really should fly with the autopilot on." Okay, so a couple hundred feet, autopilot on, and then minimums, beep, 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 autopilot off. Yeah. That's fine, whatever. I can fly the airplane both ways.
That's it.
Yeah.
So, no, that's great. Now, speaking of airplanes, we've been, watching the video here behind you. It almost looks like a green screen. You're in your garage. You got your toolboxes and you got your fuselage that you're working on for your RV7. How did you get into building your own airplane? What sparked this?
Well, if we go back to the story of when I was 12 and took my first airplane ride, that particular guy had a house on a private airport. My airport's a public use airport. I just happen to live next to, but he was in a private live-in community airport, and he had built his airplane. It was Defiant, a Burt Rutan. Burt Rutan designed the Canard airplanes. They look like Star Wars X-Wing fighters. I mean, they're cool looking airplanes. 4-seat, twin engine. He took that airplane to Alaska. He took it to the Bahamas. I mean, he really, stretched the legs on that thing. And I said, wow. And I was building model airplanes at the time. I go, you could build your own airplane? This is great. That's what started the bug. And then fast forward, as I kept building model airplanes bigger and bigger, we're in a 1-bedroom apartment in college at Western, and I'm building a 3rd scale CAP 232 big aerobatic airplane. I have a picture of it on our coffee table. It's the whole living room. I mean, these are college apartments. It's not like, a whole bunch of space. And my wife she was my girlfriend at the time. She goes, so, you keep talking about building an airplane. They keep getting bigger. You might as well just spend the money and build the one we can fly in.
Now, God, tell me the truth. Is that when you decided, I'm going to marry this girl?
Yeah.
That was the sales pitch right there.
Nice.
Funny enough, she found the house on the runway too. This was her.
Wow.
Yeah. On my birthday, we came and looked at this house, and she goes, you'll never believe it. She goes, it's foreclosed. And I'm like, wow.
That's so awesome.
That is.
Yeah, she's mine though. So, But yeah, this, so obviously building an airplane, you can't just, hang IKEA shelves and then go, I have the technical aptitude to build an airplane, right? There's a lot of metal work. Now, funny enough, I tell people that this is an airplane kit. I'm not an engineer. I let that, it comes with blueprints, but this comes in, pre-printed parts like this, where they're pre-bent. There's some holes in them sometimes like this, there's no holes on this flange, but there will be. And so you have manufactured parts, and sometimes you have raw material that is just, aluminum angle. And so you essentially are building IKEA furniture, except if you mess up, you die, so. No, but the reason I chose this particular airplane is Van's Aircraft, the RV7. It's a side-by-side 2-seat airplane, 200-mile-an-hour airplane. I just fly for fun. I don't need to go. If I'm going to go somewhere, I'm going to get on the airlines and fly there. But there's 10,000 of their airplanes flying. So the safety record's there. They build the wing spar comes factory built and treated for corrosion protection. So you have a lot of the very critical structures pre-drilled, riveted together. So for instance, this is the fuselage, the wings are upstairs in my spare bedroom, and the tail's upstairs. You start with
planes are getting bigger, and they're still
so
on
what
the
I
kitchen
did is I
table.
sought out people
Taking
that
up a bedroom.
That's right. My mom's like, so where am I going to sleep when I stay at your house? I'm like, well, the couch. And she's like, thanks.
There's a pull-out.
You can just put the mattress on the wing.
That's right.
There you go.
So, it's 25 by 25 feet square, basically, if you put the wings on. So you build it in sub kits. So the first thing I did is they have this toolbox kit. It's riveted together. Yeah. And it's a sheet. I just keep like tools in there and stuff, but it's just sheet metal, and it includes all the skills you need to build an airplane. So my buddies who had built multiple airplanes said, hey, build that box first. And I took a sheet metal airplane manufacturing ground school where over a 3-day weekend, you build some structures, and I don't even know where that is. That's somewhere in the house. And then I built 3 airplanes with friends, their airplanes, one of them being an RV7. So I actually seen this built top to bottom already. So it was kind of nice. I have photos, and we already did a lot of the mental work to get it done. And then you can go to the factory and buy brand new kits. They come to your garage in a crate. Big sheets, pre-punched parts, stuff like that. But I bought them in sub kits. So I bought the tail, then the wings, and then the fuselage, and then the final kit's the motor mount landing gear canopy. And the reason I did that was I didn't want to lay out 20 grand. I didn't have it. And it's a hobby I wanted to do. So what I did is 80% of home builders don't finish their airplane. 80%.
Wow, that's a lot.
Start them, don't finish. So I looked at that instead of a detriment, and I go, there's a lot of kits out there that have been bought that are sitting in the crate still. So I found an airline pilot locally, had the whole tail kit, never even took it out of the box. Had it for 7 years. I said, what do you want for it? I said, I'm an airline pilot too. Do I get that discount? He's like, no, I'm going to charge you double, And so he sold to me for half. So I think I spent $800 on the tail kit, and you get plans, you get this binder I mentioned before. It's a play-by-play, instruction manual, if you will, step by step, what to drill, what to fit. I built the tail. I had A&Ps over. I had my good friends that had built lots of airplanes over, and they inspect it, and they go, hey, this looks like good work. Keep going. So now I'm like, all right, well, I finished the tail. Now what? I found a wing in Texas. So bought the wing. Again, about half price. It was $3,000. Usually they go for $6,000 to $7,000 brand new. Built the wing over 2 years, both wings. And then at this point, most people don't have a fuselage. I didn't want to buy a project that someone had started because you don't know their workmanship. I mean, I'm going to put my family in this potentially. So you're your own quality control. So I bought the fuselage new from Vans last July. And this was $5,500, I believe. And they ship it in a crate. Because most people who get to the fuselage, they're at the point where they'll finish the airplane. So I'm running out of garage space. It's heated in here because we're in Chicago. So it's heated and insulated. There's a big heater up there. Yeah. And I was telling my wife, I'm like, this really sucks. We got the heated garage. We like keeping the only rule was her car had to stay in the garage during this process. That's the only rule. She said, well, I think we could. She goes, if we turn the wings a certain way, I bet we can get them up the stairs and in the spare bedroom. And I'm like, that's your call. This is, I don't want to step on the wrong toes here. She goes, no, let's do it. So they're up in my, we have a spare bedroom. It's kind of like an office computer room.
Yeah.
And so I got the wings tail done. I got the wings done 2017, started in 2014. And the fuselage, there's a lot of detail in this thing. I mean, it's upside down right now because you build everything square upside down. And then there's just tons of details. I'm about to put the rudder pedals in and all of that. But it's a fun project. It's just like getting your ATP. It's just like any other massive goal. You eat the elephant one bite at a time. You kick the soccer ball. Last night, I drilled 7 holes. Am I going to build the airplane tomorrow doing that? No, but it's further along than it was yesterday, Yeah.
Can you give us a little a preview there of the build so far?
So again, the wings are upstairs, but we'll try to zoom out here. This is the fuselage. So there's the forward half, which is unriveted. I don't know if, is it dimming on you guys? Are you good?
No, that's fine.
And the tail cone you can see is riveted. Half of it's riveted. And it's going to be a tail dragger. And then I could kind of get, that's the belly of the airplane, whole bunch of ribs. And then this is the front. That's where your feet will go. Again, this is the bottom of the airplane, so it's upside down. And then you can see the spar is a gold color. That's the anodization that the factory put on. But it's coming along. It's a fun project. Keeps me out of trouble when I have too many days off.
Well, it's a great way to keep you in the garage and not out at the local pub or hanging out with the fellas,
and
right?
The kids come out and help. I mean, sometimes they just rearrange the parts on the shelf under the table, but it's bonding time for dad and kids. And that's exactly the spirit of this project. Is Wednesday nights I used to have my buddies over and we would all work on it. More than we would usually not get anything done on the airplane. We would just drink beer and sit in the garage. But the point is, it's what an achievement it'll be to take the first flight. I hope it's I assume it's one of the feelings like your first solo or the first time you flew a jet or whatever. It's going to be one of those accomplishments that, it's a life goal. I've always wanted to build my own airplane, and I've had friends that have had that first flight, and you could see it's just something that you have to experience to really get all the, everything out of it.
Yeah. And to have your name on the nameplate there, or the manufacturer for that particular airplane, is pretty cool too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you have a goal for when to complete it by, or you just, 7 holes at a time, and whenever that time shows up?
No, I worked on a lot more before I had the kids and this job. You come home for 3 days, it's laundry, family time, and
the kids and work really cut into life,
Yeah. And so I don't let it consume my life. I come out here, an hour at a time. And some days I get a lot done. Some days it's just a couple things. The old answer is it's going to be done on Tuesday. And then, of course, everybody goes, well, what Tuesday? Well, that's any Tuesday. It's going to be done on some Tuesday. But, the limiting factor right now is the financial. An engine from Lycoming is $35,000. I don't have $35,000. So I'm going to either have to buy a used motor or save a lot of money and do it in 10 years. So it's one of those things, if you can't want to, this sounds really funny, but you can't build an airplane because you want to fly it. You have to build an airplane because you want to build an airplane. So my trick is I still go fly. We have an Aranca Champ here, 1946 Aranca Champ. I go fly smaller airplanes all the time to scratch that itch.
Yeah.
That way this doesn't get rushed. I want to do this right for obvious reasons. I want it when I mess up a part, because it happens, you make mistakes, shoot a bad rivet, cut a part. You can cut a part too short twice. Ask me how I know. It's right here. I cut it and I cut it again and it was still too short. Now, but you know what? You got to be okay with throwing that in the scrap bin and remaking the part. It may mean backtracking, a little bit. I'll show you actually, the blueprints, there's pages and pages, but the blueprints, look like this. And at first that looks intimidating, but then you realize all it is, just like we've discussed multiple times today, is it's baby steps. It's you make a part, and then you make a group of parts, then you bolt those together and they become an assembly, and then you put the assemblies together and it becomes that. And eventually, the wings, I thought, boy, I'm never going to get these done, and the first wing took 1.5 years because there's a lot of thinking. There's a lot of, I never thought about what kind of lights I want to put in the wingtip. And you get to the point of putting the skins on, you got to figure out the electrical routing. Well, guess what? The second one took 6 months because you already have the knowledge of building the first one. The only problem is, which is my big beef, they only give you a drawing of one of the wings. So they only give you the left wing. So you have to mirror it.
Reverse it.
I've made so many left wing parts and I go, I made it backwards. Throw it out. So it requires an immense amount of patience. And I get frustrated with it. And I walk away from it for a few weeks at a time. It's kind of the mode I'm in right now, actually, is I got free time, but I look at it and it just makes me mad. So,
yeah. No, and you told me a little bit before the show that part of this build process was that you joined EAA and took some workshops on, fabricating and manipulating sheet metal and whatnot. How has that helped in the process?
Oh, yeah. So, you go up, in this case, EAA has been it's like ALPA or APA. It's a network group of people that all have similar interests. One's for work, one's for fun. But EAA, I've been introduced to people that are mentors on this project now. And then I went up to Oshkosh, Wisconsin, and they have a metal workshop course. I think it was $100 or something. And you put yourself in a hotel. Yeah, and same thing. They teach you basics of metalworking, and then you build a little project. And that little project is something you can take home and put up on a shelf. But it's the first step. In fact, when people ask me, a good friend of mine, the airline pilot, that's the Czech airman, he asked me, he goes, I really want to build an airplane. I said, no, you don't. I talk people out of it till I'm blue in the face, because the people that should build an airplane are the ones who won't stop bothering me. They keep coming over and helping. But it's tedious. I mean, it's really tedious. If you just want a flyable airplane for cheaper, it's not, the math doesn't work out because your labor,
Yeah.
you have to enjoy working with your hands and creating things. And that's what I'm into, just having a project. I was always building motorcycles and stuff like that, as a kid. So
Yeah, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears go into a build.
yeah.
As a matter of fact, we've spoken with some guests in the past that really have done a wonderful job building their own airplane. Back on episode 52, we first introduced SandPiper pilot as well, who Jonathan Gruber, who is building his own airplane. He owned an RV, but now he's building a Lancer Legacy, and he gives a little bit of a tour of that build. He was over in Redmond, Oregon for that. Yeah, and we had, Jonathan back on episode 57, where he updated us with the build and his home airport area, his hangar over in Aurora. And it's a lot of work. A tremendous amount of work. I mean, I get it. I understand the mechanics of it. But I think until you start to tackle a project like this or know someone that is tackling a project like this, you never really can get a full understanding of just how intricate and how detailed and how time consuming an aircraft build is. So my hat's off to you for this.
Well, and you really find out an airplane has a soul, because this thing has been so frustrating at times, and we yell at each other. I mean, it's I've threatened to sell it, and then all of a sudden everything starts going well again. I actually had a pilot who wanted a quick build version. You can get these where they're already, you can throw couch cushions in and it looks like an airplane, and you just do the final assembly. It's obviously more expensive, but that's an option some people take. So this pilot calls me and goes, "Yep, I'm good with your asking price. I will get a truck. I'm going to leave Pennsylvania tomorrow." And I just got cold feet. I started looking at all the photos I had taken over all those years and my wife's going, "How could you get rid of that's like a child?" And I'm like, I couldn't believe she said that, but it's true. It's got an attitude and it's got a soul, and so we're okay right now, but sometimes it gets a little dicey.
Sometimes she'll piss you off.
Sometimes you just got to turn the heater off in the garage when you leave for the night.
Exactly. Breathe.
That's what you get. So you've had quite a wonderful journey in aviation. Let's get into some of the Q&A as we kind of get into the tail end here. What have been some of the biggest challenges for you, Tony?
Being a second career guy, when you're 30 years old, 35, I'm 35 now, you know how you learn, but we're not as fast, as sharp as a 22-year-old anymore. And it was intimidating going to airline training and just going in blind. And that was a challenge. I worked hard at it. It wasn't like I just showed up and knew the stuff. I mean, I read the books. I did what I could. And I think that's, they always say cooperated to graduate. Well, the truth is that's an anecdotal thing again. But the truth in that statement is you still have to meet them halfway. You don't just show up and get shoved through the system. I've watched a good friend of mine. He became a good friend in long-term training. He had a conversation where they said, "Look, you're falling behind the curve. Here's the deal. We can give you one more shot and you're done if you mess that up, or you can be an FO for another year." And he took option B, and I commend him for it. And he's he's a second career guy like me. And I talked to him, but I said, "How do you feel about it?" He goes, "Hey, I'm just glad they were willing to put that option on the table. I'm not ready." But they're displacing guys, right, into the position. Yeah. So arguably, I think that's why they gave him that option, saying, "Hey, it's fine. Let's keep moving on with life. You're a good employee. Let's roll with it." And so that's one of the biggest challenges was training, I think. I've always had jobs with odd schedules. As a sound engineer, they would call you today and say, "Hey, by the way, you want to go to Wisconsin tomorrow for 10 days?" And you're like, what do you, yeah. Because guess what? If you said no, you moved down the list. It wasn't seniority like we're used to. It was who was willing to work seniority. So if you got to the bottom of the list, you'd never get called. They'd call the people who were most willing to work first.
Sure.
And that list would sort itself out where the bottom people would just fall out. If you weren't working, you don't get paid. So for me, I was like, hey, not only will I work that day, and then we might have had plans. I'd talk to my wife and go, hey, or she was my fiance at the time, all the same person. I go, hey, I got to go to Wisconsin for 10 days. She goes, really? Yeah. All right. Well, so that part of the job wasn't a challenge for me. I'm used to getting jacked around with an unpredictable schedule, except when you're a sound engineer, they put you in a room with a really grody other dude where you have to sleep with your wallet in your pocket with your hand in your wallet. It's I mean, yeah. You were sharing hotel rooms with crew members that, were in rough shape,
Wow.
So I remember
roadies.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so we've talked about some of the challenges. What's been the high point thus far?
Well, we talked about making those memorable moments. There's two that really stick out to me. One, during my Captain IOE, my really good friend, one of my best friends, Mark, he's a Czech airman on the 175. And he got it to work out where the training department put him on a trip with me. And I remember sitting at O'Hare getting to the airplane, and I get a text and he says, hey, you better buy coffees. I'm going to have you practice being captain. So we get to the airplane, we shut the door, and he looks at me and he goes, can you believe they're letting us fly an airliner together?
Red flags.
But you know what? It was so cool because the minute we went into the first checklist, it was professional. And that was the most enjoyable flight of my life so far, because I have a friend that I've known for 10 plus years sitting in the right seat.
Yeah.
There's no, hey, where are you from? I mean, you know each other so well. It was like being on a road trip, but except you trust him to do his job like I do my job. And then you could ask him questions you might feel stupid asking a Czech airman, Hey, so like, And I remember the flight attendant, she was fine. She was a little grumpy. She was upset about getting put on this trip. And we get to Jacksonville, Florida, and the door opens, my first, one of my first trips on the airplane. So I'm still getting to know it, and had a landing that built your confidence up. I'm like, oh man, I'm feeling good now. And she opens the door. She goes, what is wrong with you guys? And we're like, what? She goes, you guys are both giggling like schoolgirls up here the whole flight. I said, hey, we're enjoying life right now. She goes, all right. And the other experience, I remember I was leaving Indy real early, first flight of the day. It's dark out. It's 200 at O'Hare. And I've got a guy who he's got 52 hours in a jet. I mean, at all. And I'm descending over Lake Michigan into the soup. And I remember we have a little chart holder light, and there's nothing, you're used to looking at the captain, and you've heard this, phrase a lot, but you look over and there's no one there, to the left, because you're the captain. Yeah. And I was like, you know what? Like, and this guy's got a great attitude. He's like, I'll do anything, let me know what you want to do. And I had him fly to Indy the night before, and I was flying in, and I remember going, this is really up to me. Like, this guy, I'm sure he could put together an ILS approach, but I'm thinking of alternates and bingo fuel and going back to Indy and all these people on board and their safety. And I was like, this is cool. I'm proud to be where I'm at right now in my career. And if this is all I made it to, I could say I've experienced happiness, along the way. And I've hit the pinnacle of what I would say is what my goal was. Everything else is frosting on the cake is how I see it.
Yeah. And restricted FOs, man, that's a show topic right there. Restricted FOs. Any FO has less than 100 hours is considered a restricted FO. And therefore there's certain criteria that need to be met before they can perform landings on their own without assistance from the PIC. So here you were flying with a restricted FO, and that's it. You can't look over to your left and say, what do you think we should do? You're it. And the fact that you tackle that responsibility in a positive light and you would consider that a high point speaks to your character, sir. I'll tell you right now, that's pretty cool.
It just felt like you've earned it at that point. It's not just something it's not a pin that was pinned to your shirt. You know, it's the crossover point where, you know, now that was a PIC thing. And I remember like while I landed and I felt like, man, that was just, what a cool feeling, you know?
What is your most favorite aircraft that you've flown?
Ooh, that's a tough one.
And it doesn't necessarily have to be an airliner.
Sure. No, it's
or
not.
General Aviation.
I flew, you know what's funny? I flew a Nanchang CJ6. Nobody knows what that is. It's Chinese. It's a copy of a Russian Yak. It's a radial engine airplane.
Oh.
Now, it was my favorite only because it was quirky. It had air brakes. It had every instrument was in meters, and every instrument was in Chinese.
Oh boy!
And the
prop term left.
Yeah, the attitude indicator. The brown was on the top for some reason, and it was just. And the guy, who was flying it with me, he owned the airplane. He's in the front seat, which was a student seat. And he goes, "Don't press any of these buttons." And I'm like, "Why?" He goes, "It disconnects my flight controls and flight instruments because you could fail. You could literally fail instruments from the back seat."
Oh, like a trainer.
Oh,
yeah.
That was a neat experience, and that was my first aerobatic ride. And I said, "Look, I'm a wuss. I don't want to get sick in your airplane. I'm good with just a vanilla ride." And he goes, "Look, it's just me and you up there." He's also a captain at Legacy Airline, and he goes, "You do what you want to do." So he goes, "You want to do a wing over?" He goes, "You're not going to get sick if you're flying it." So then we did barrel rolls and loops, and all of a sudden I'm having the time of my life, But that was a really neat. I don't think I'll ever fly a Chinese fighter trainer ever again.
That's cool.
I think I figured out why brown is on top, because the air quality in China sometimes can be kind of brownish air.
Yeah, that's the color of the air.
Was it blue on the bottom?
It was, yeah.
That sounds like an instrument error.
Russian airplanes are like that too, and I think
maybe they just put it upside down.
Yeah, right.
That's what I'm
thinking.
Yeah,
if you look at Russian fighters, I think they do that because the Tundra is white. So I think I think that's a contrast thing for them. I don't know. Again, making stuff up.
Yeah,
sounds good to me.
Russians you never know.
It's all about confidence.
Yeah.
A lot of them crashed into the ground while they were flying, so you never know.
Well, they were inverted.
What's a sky pointer?
White over red, just right. Wait a minute.
Oh my God.
I've never heard that before. So if you could only have one layover destination, they say, all right, for the next year, you can only go to one layover. Manhattan, Kansas.
Oh, yeah.
Come on.
Yeah. Every time I fly over MHK, I look down and I always look over and tell the captain, man, that's a good layover.
No,
I've never been there.
Manhattan, Kansas sounds like nothing. It's K-State University.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful campus to walk around. And the hotel we stay in is built for the parents. So it's like a 2-bedroom suite.
Yeah. It's purple hotel. Everything's purple.
Yeah.
Everything's purple. Yeah. There's tons of great food and places to socialize right across the street. The little downtown area. I mean, it is just, believe it or not, I actually enjoy Albuquerque, New Mexico too.
Really?
I love the Southwest, and I have a really good friend that lives there. So I get to go see him when I'm in Albuquerque.
Tony, I'm really impressed with, I alluded to it earlier when we were just talking with your positive outlook on life, which I think is really refreshing from a pilot perspective. I kid you not that I have met probably no pilots that are like you, who are your disposition is as sunny and positive and forward looking or forward thinking as yours. And I think that is a fantastic quality to have. I wish that I was much more like you. I won't lie. One of the biggest reasons that I left the 121 world, which I do not regret, by the way, at all. Well, very, 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 very rarely. But was some of those things that you just kind of take in stride. And I am extremely impressed. It's been great listening to your story. And, you know, as with most interviews, I mostly sit and listen. And that was the big takeaway. And I'm extremely impressed. And I wish you all the best. I'm sure that you're going to have a fantastic career because you obviously have a long career in front of you. And to be honest with you, I suspect it's going to get a whole lot better for you as you move forward.
Thank you, Roger. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. So far in your career, who has been the biggest influence to you?
Oh man,
This one gets everybody.
you know I think it's a collective. Yeah, I've had different. The one thing I will say is the common theme. So many people that had, paid it forward, helped enhance my career. I was stuck running out of money with a little kid, trying to build time to get my instant rating done. And a gentleman I had met at the EAA chapter, he said, I have an Archer. Meet me at the airport and we'll figure out something for rental. I said, great. Because I couldn't rent an airplane at $130 an hour. I met him there. He goes, all right, you're on the insurance. Just give me your certificate number. I'm like, okay, so what's the agreement? He goes, put gas in the airplane and don't break it. Okay.
Wow.
So
Wow.
I've had all these people throughout my life that have helped, it's like they gave you that little next boost of rocket fuel to get you to the next step. And, my friend Mark that helped me get to the airline, encouragement was my Czech airman, big influence. In my childhood, my parents let me fly radio control, let me go to that first flight at the dentist. My dad took me to Glenview Air Base, which used to be up here in Chicago. And we saw, the F-14s fly an air show, and it like shook the ground, and and it was just amazing. All of those little things had built up to just forward momentum in this career. And like you, there's my very first airline flight, the Czech airman that flew, I still keep in touch with him. He called me the day before my first day. And he says, hey, just wanted to introduce myself. I'm the Czech airman for tomorrow, and we're going to fly together for the next 4 days. And I'm like, yeah, I'm trying to look at charts. I've never been to O'Hare. He goes, look at these two charts at O'Hare. Other than that, just show up tomorrow with your uniform on. We're going to have fun. And it stopped me. And I was like, whoa, fun. He goes, yeah, that's why we do this. Right. And it just put a smile on my face. He killed any anxiety I had, because I showed up
awesome.
with a big smile. He hands me a cup of coffee and he goes, all right, so we're going to take an airplane to Champaign and you're going to still be on the ground at O'Hare, but just.
That's what he said.
Yeah. Yeah, those are good stories. I think you used to do that also, Tony, right? Call up your students ahead of time if
Every
they're new.
time.
And yeah, I used to do that too. Same. Try to put them at ease and make it a great trip and make it fun. Yeah, that's awesome to hear.
Yeah, I think the first time that really affected me, that I realized that I was doing something right by calling the student the day before or 2 days before, is I had called a student towards the tail end of my time at SandPiper as a Czech airman. And we call them students, but they're new hires that are typed in the airplane, and they're just getting their initial operating experience with a Czech airman who is basically an instructor pilot, just to make that clear. But and I called up this individual and I said, hey, I'm going to be flying with you tomorrow. I see you already have like a 4-day trip under your belt. So, probably we're just going to be polishing up a couple things. I'm going to answer any questions you might have. First off, let's try to figure out where you're at and what you think we can work on, and we'll come prepared for that. And he says, I'm actually kind of glad you called, because I was considering just not doing this anymore. And I said, really?
Wow.
What is causing you to feel this way? He says, well, I've had a really bad experience on my first week of IOE. He said, in the training department, everybody was great. He said, I had a couple hangups on this and a couple hangups on that, but nothing major. I got over them. And, I got my type rating on schedule. Everything went fine. And my first week of IOE, the check airman basically told me, you need to study up. I can't believe you actually got out of the schoolhouse being this bad in the airplane. And I'm like, well, did you debrief after each flight or after each day, kind of go over? He goes like, no, are you kidding me? He was the slam clicker. He just said, all right, I'll see you tomorrow, and went to his room. And I felt bad. I genuinely felt bad for the guy. And I said, well, are you going to, I'm really sorry that was your experience. I hope that I've never had that experience with anyone, or at least any of my students. Are you going to show up tomorrow? And he says, yeah, I'll show up. And I said, well, what time are you getting in? And he was commuting in as well to Chicago. And he says, well, I'm staying at this hotel and I'm commuting in. And I said, well, I'm going to make sure I stay at that hotel as well. When you get in, you text me and we'll meet downstairs for dinner. And it's around dinner time, and we'll kind of go over as much as we can so that when we're in the airplane, we've already talked about it and we just have to progress. And he genuinely was nervous. And at the end of that experience, not only did I pass him as endorsed, ready to go, because he was fine, he actually wrote up a very positive debrief for the company and the training department on me, indicating that I was so professional and I made him feel at ease, whereas the other person, who's unnamed, really made him feel nervous and really didn't instruct and do the things that you're supposed to do as a check airman to make your student feel at ease. It's a new experience for them. All the things we've mentioned, and Tony mentioned about his journey and how these positive experiences really shaped and molded how he was. Unfortunately, sometimes the negative experiences also have a dramatic effect on how we operate. And I always thought that negative experiences are going to happen. I've had a handful myself, and I learned from them. I learned how not to be. I learned how not to project a particular way onto another pilot. And if it wasn't for those negative experiences, I wouldn't be the pilot I am today. So I don't look forward to them, but I take them and learn from them. And here I was able to communicate with someone the day before their trip, find out that they were almost ready to give up. It was his wife that convinced him to just keep going. It was probably just a fluke, and it was.
Wow.
So these little things, these little nuances that you have, and you don't have to be in a teaching role to do it. You could just be an everyday pilot. You could be a first officer talking to a friend who is still flight instructing and looking for a job or advice. Share it. Share that advice. Have that positivity, because it makes a huge difference in somebody else's career path.
So out of curiosity, was that a positive write-up or that kudos that pilot gave you, did that result in you being awarded the pilot of the quarter? Or was it pilot of the quarter?
You remember that?
Hell yeah, I do. That was awesome.
Yeah, it was a couple things. There were multiple, the secretary in the chief pilot's office was a big deal. It was rumored that she ran the whole thing because there were multiple chief pilots over the years, but she had been there a long time. She was a wonderful person. You walked in, she knew exactly who you were out of the thousands of pilots. Great memory, total no nonsense, straight shooter, told it to you straight, wasn't afraid to mince words. And she was tough. And I had a really positive experience with her, and she wrote me up as, always being professional and wearing the uniform correctly. And I always was well groomed. And every time I went in, and I had a lot of positive reviews or positive things said from students, from captains that I've flown with in my career path. And I was awarded the Presidential Award.
That's what it was. At
the company. And I was invited for my wife and I to go to Dallas to go to a dinner with the president and CEO of SandPiper. Along with a bunch of people. It wasn't just me. It was, I think, a good 20 or 25 from all the departments all over the country.
Right, yeah.
I got to have a steak dinner, and have my picture
That's
taken.
awesome.
And I got a little plaque to put on my wall, and it was a fun experience.
Cool, man. Congrats. That's awesome.
Yeah, I can't believe you remember that. Thank you.
Oh yeah, man.
I hate to brag about that stuff. That's not.
No, that's good, man. That's good stuff, man. That's it doesn't happen to a lot of people, and when it happens to somebody I remember that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah,
great job.
Did you ever get a chance to do anything like that with the company? I'm sure they were handing those out for quite some time.
Me?
Yeah.
They called me Captain DeLaceus. All right, let's just put it that way. No, I didn't get any rewards. The only ones that knew me the best was the the assistant in the chief pilot office, and every time I'd walk in, she'd roll her eyes. All right, Captain DeLaceus, what is it now? What delays you want to talk about today?
Oh shit. So Tony, what about yourself? You've been flying on the line now for over a year as a captain, right? Over 2 years.
Yeah.
And any particular moments that stand out as, wow, that really turned out pretty cool. I'm pretty proud of myself.
Every landing? No.
Yeah. Surprise every landing. No, it's little things you realize, it's probably from my dad's side, but my mom too. But, since I was young, I had this pride and workmanship thing where you want to be proud of what you put out as far as the work you do. If it's building something, if it's your job. That's why when we flew together, I was actually impressed. You're one of the few guys who wore the uniform actually in its entirety, but pressed, and I always iron my stuff. And I've run into that a few times where guys are, I got in the plane one time. I'm like, did your shirt get stuck to the wall of a freaking, car wash? And I said, it's wrinklier than, and he said, no, he goes, if I'm not, it's a brand new guy with this attitude. So it comes from somewhere. And he goes, if I'm not getting paid, you're not paying to get a new shirt or something like that. And I said, but you're the one who looks like the fool wearing the shirt like that. I said, you're the guy that you have to have pride in your own self-image or pride in what you're doing.
Yeah.
No, okay, I get it. Not everybody wants to take it to the dry cleaner. But, it was a mess. It looked like he got beat up on the subway. I'm like, are you okay?
Yeah.
I didn't even know he was crew. He came up to the airplane with a backpack and in a different company's jacket. And
I love
and he
that.
goes, no. But it was a different brand of company, like it was an aviation company. And he goes, hey, he starts talking. And I said, oh, hey, what are you jump seating? Or he goes, no, I'm flying with you. I'm like, oh, all right. It's okay. Everybody views it differently, and that's the beauty of it. I never wanted to be the police officer of the sky as a captain. I just want to, show up and do the job how I think it should be done. And so, but there's been some cool opportunities where, Thanksgiving night, for instance, there was a whole bunch of people, 14 people were missing from the flight. We're the last flight out Thanksgiving night to Rhode Island, Providence, Rhode Island. And the gate agent's panicking. Yeah.
That's where I'm from.
Boston. Oh, okay. Warwick's where we stay.
Yep.
And I made the decision, which is, this from the chief pilot's experience, you don't delay flights. And I made the decision to go up, and I told the gate agent, I said, this is on me. I'm going to go up to the restroom, and you give me a thumbs up when we got everybody on the airplane. And I made an announcement in the cabin. I said, hey, everybody, nice. I said, everybody in the airplane. I said, this is the last flight out Thanksgiving night. I said, you would want me to wait for you too if it was 10 minutes. I'll still get you there on time. And nobody balked at it. I stood in the cabin and faced the passengers. They said, you got it. Got a whole bunch of thumbs up. And sure enough, we got those people on the plane. I had a small conversation with the delay, but that's the leadership part of the role. You have to know when to stick your neck out there. If you're unwilling to stick your neck out there all the time and you just want to stay in the box, that's fine. You're doing the job safe. You're doing it according to the book. But in my opinion, you are a leader and you got to know when you can use that leverage. Now, was I going to lose my job over it? Absolutely not. No. But guess what? When everybody else is now calm that it's not on them, everybody does their job really efficiently, and nice Skyhawk. So, it's those decisions that I can make now that I enjoy, when you can ride the line a little bit and know when to stick your neck out there. That's enjoyable for me. And hopefully it makes an impact on some of the people customers and the people I work with, I got a kudos like you did. We had a veteran on board. We're going to Steamboat Springs. I know we're playing storytell right now. I apologize.
This is great. This is the whole point.
This is what it's all about.
But the flight attendant, her family was a Navy family. I didn't know that. First leg, new first officer. And this was an airport that only the captain could fly in and out of. It's a Sarah airport. And so the approach says captain has to do the landing, captain has to do the takeoff. So I was kind of distracted with studying that. I had looked at it ahead of time, right? We have to record that we reviewed that information, the videos. And she goes, this veteran's here, and he can't walk. How do we know there's going to be a wheelchair there? Because it's a hard stand airport. And mainline goes there. And so I said, there should be one, but let me just call ops. So I just picked up the phone, called ops. I said, I need a wheelchair at the airplane when we get there. Not nearby. I want it there, And right, that's part of it. In my opinion, if I'm busy with the airplane, I may not have time to do ancillary things. But like we discussed, if the dots are close and I can connect them, I could pick up the phone in 5 minutes. Now, look, who knows if it's really going to be there, but we made an effort. And sure enough, we got there and there was one there. I mean, it was at the ramp. They come up and get the guy. And I guess the flight attendant was impressed by it. She goes, I have never seen that. And I'm like, well, what's the big deal really to me? But she goes, no. She goes, that matters. That matters that is the mission, right? We get people places safely.
Yeah.
And remember, we're humans. Like, we get frustrated, we get tired. But at the end of the day, be human about it. Like, that was your aunt or uncle. You don't want them to struggle with that. It's embarrassing.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And even in mainline, I see that all the time. It's like, oh, well, the pilots are gone. And, and meanwhile, the flight attendants are all left. And meanwhile, there's a passenger on the jet bridge waiting for a wheelchair. Embarrassing because they were an aisle chair. And they got them off the plane so that everybody can go and get to their connecting flights. And here I come walking down the jet bridge because I'm taking the plane out and there's still a passenger there. And, who knows their condition, if their sweatpants are falling down or what. And it's I can only imagine the embarrassment for them. And I just can't stand that. I will stop what I'm doing and I'm not going to set foot on that airplane until they're taken care of because like you said, you got to connect the dots. If they're there.
Connect the dots. Sometimes they're too far apart and it just can't happen, right? Sometimes stuff breaks, stuff. But in that case, hey, I got 5 extra minutes. I'll go grab a chair, roll them up top, Because I'm not a fan of let's complain about it. I'm not a fan of let's try to I called on the radio, so it's done. A project passes, a project complete, I think is the saying. I'm a fan of, okay, let's just connect the dots. Let's solve it real quick. Can we get a chair? Oh, there's a chair right there. Boom. You're in a chair. Now we can radio for the people and I can go do my job. And I get it. Again, I don't think negatively about the crews that walk away from it because it really isn't inside the lines of what we're doing day to day. It's easy to get blinders on and go, hey, I got to get to that next jet bridge or that next airplane, or I got to catch the bus. And it sometimes you just miss it, right? I don't criticize them for it, but if I see it, hey, no one's around. All right, here's a chair.
Yeah.
It's just an example of I think that's the kind of leadership that flying an airplane is mechanical, but if you can teach your crew, not even just the flying crew, but the whole crew, have compassion. That
could be your family member, or
exactly.
If it was your Nana sitting there waiting for a wheelchair, would you walk off?
Do you want to be proud of the place you work at? And if the answer is yes, then you don't want to be embarrassed by the way they treat people. So, and if you can control what I tell this to everybody, I tell this to my wife in the car. I'm like, look, you can't control how close the guy behind you is following you on the highway. The only thing we can control is the position we put our car in and how close we follow the next person in front of us. So if you can't control it, you can't worry about it, right?
Yeah.
You can't, it's out of your control. Move on.
Yep.
And that's the same thing. There's some things you just have no control over, and some you can. And that's where you try to connect those dots that are close.
Yeah.
Low hanging fruit.
Yeah.
That's it. So final, last couple questions here for you. If you lost your ability to fly tomorrow, what would you do?
I would like to teach. I've always loved to teach. Preferably, I'd like to teach flying. In the airline environment, it'd be a simulator sort of a thing or ground school. It'd be pretty devastating for me because it's such a big part of my life. But I think I could still fulfill a lot of what I couldn't do in the air with passing on knowledge and help mentoring new pilots or people trying to get to the career. That's probably what I would do. It would be devastating. I mean, I've thought about that before, and it's like telling a race car driver they can't drive a race car anymore. I mean, that's a hit, But you okay, you can look back, or you can just go, okay, what's the next step? The next step would be try to continue to be involved with aviation.
So if you were to go back in time and whisper in your own young ear and tell yourself something, what would you tell yourself?
I would tell myself to enjoy every step along the way.
Nice.
Because sometimes you get tied up with getting to the next step. We all do that. That's human nature. What's funny about wisdom is you can't really give wisdom until you experience it. You can, our parents all taught us things. And then like when you're 35, you go, oh, that really
That's
strikes
what
a chord
that meant.
They were right.
Yeah, because you can't just take the advice. You need the life experience to build the whole picture. So that's what I would say is just enjoy every step of the way, and I'm happy with how I progressed. I'm happy it was non-traditional. I'm happy that, I get to do what I enjoy, I'm actually I can't wait till our passengers come back because of this, because of COVID and all that. It's great to see the loads coming up, and it's great to be going to work. And, it's human nature to need a mission. We need that mission of, somebody needs us. Somebody, we need to go to work. That's a fun thing. And I'm very fortunate we live in a time and place where we can do what we want to do and enjoy it.
Yeah, we're all very, very, very fortunate. And this ability to fly, go back 50 years. You told somebody you were a pilot, an airline pilot at that. Wow. Talk about commanding respect.
Well, what would you guys tell your younger self? Same question.
Rob, what do you think?
Do not give up, because I was very easily discouraged when I was younger when it comes to stuff like flying and jobs and stuff like that. I could look at a machine, like a car, a motor, anything like that, and I can be like, I have no clue what I'm doing here, but I'm going to get to the bottom of it and I'm going to break this thing down or fix it. But if you put you to become a pilot, you have to do this. I'd look at all that and I'd be like, screw that. I'm just going to go, change the oil on this truck back here. You know what I mean? So it was I would say don't give up. And it took me about probably good 10 years out of high school to get to that point and say, all right, this is what you want to do, now. And, don't give up because it's going to be expensive if you do.
Yeah.
Right.
So, so that's what I would tell myself.
The calling got stronger than the, giving up thing.
Yeah, definitely.
For me, wow. I ask the question all the time, every show.
Yeah.
And I don't think I've ever really given it as much thought as I probably should have. And now I understand how difficult it is, because you don't want to just like arbitrarily give something. If I could go back maybe 13, 14 years old and whisper in my own ear, I tell myself that there are going to be many decisions to make on your journey in life. And the easy road, or the road that you think would be the most interesting, is not always the one for you. And that anything worth achieving and having in life is going to be difficult to do, difficult to achieve. Because if it was easy, it wouldn't be that valuable or that worth it. I probably would still have gotten into aviation, but I would have told myself not to be discouraged by the opinions of others, including my very own family, that it was too dangerous or too expensive, or I wasn't smart enough. And try to convey into myself that confidence is everything. Not overconfidence, but confidence in oneself. If I would have had that at an early age, the sky's the limit to what I could have accomplished. Not that I've not, excelled at aviation and at other careers, and now even at this podcasting. I'm having a blast doing this thing, learning, and I'm all excited today because I got like extra lighting now going on with the green screen, and I'm having a blast, But I never would have thought at a younger age that I would have been able to accomplish all that I have. So just basically do the work, be confident, and the hard stuff is probably the path you should take.
It's interesting though. You touched on something, and I think it's more common than not. But you said your family not encouraging maybe flying for various reasons. So I talked to my dad about that, because he was always the one that says, he was a very conservative guy, and he says, you work during the workday and you have fun on the weekend. You earn the money doing something that you work at, and then you don't mix those two worlds.
Yeah.
And it's not that he didn't want to encourage me to do what I wanted to do, or maybe he was just really good at knowing my personality type and motivating me, but he never talked me into going down this road. But I was almost like, well, I'll show you, I can do this. I'm capable. And maybe it's good that they didn't encourage, maybe that's the reason you're also at the point you are, because you really did want to do it. It wasn't like someone nudged you that way. You had to go that way because you were getting blown the other way, by the breeze, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
How about you, Rob? Was that, were you encouraged to fly, or?
No, I wasn't encouraged to fly. My family was not an aviation, family. My dad was Navy. He retired as a ship serviceman, 20 something years in the Navy. And he is deathly, morbidly, like totally panicky, scared of flying. I mean, he pulls the Rain Man when he gets near an airport. So, I didn't get the flying bug from him. And my mother, she was in finance. So she just not even closely related to flying. So my flying bugs and everything came from, and all the flying motivation came from some of my friends. And I did have I call him my uncle. He's my godfather. He loves airplanes, total aviation fanatic. And when I told Tony, you've heard this story before. When I was based up in New York, I actually stayed at his house as a crash pad. So
cool.
It's perfect situation. He would track me on FlightAware. I took my schedule, and he's like, "Hey, I saw you holding over Canarsie or something like that." I'm like, "Yeah, dude, that's right." So we just talk shop like we're doing right now the whole time I'm up there. So it was wonderful. But those are the kind of the guys that got me going in the aviation direction. And I did join the Air Force. I was enlisted, but I was a mechanic on airplanes, and that was my forte. That's what I I was an auto mechanic, so I became an aviation mechanic and worked on fighters. And it wasn't until I actually got a ride in the F-16 in 2001 when I actually had the like, I need to do this. And that's when I went to flying school, and the rest is pretty much history. So I got hired on at SandPiper in August of 2005. Actually, you may know the story, but I worked at the same flight school as Tony. And then as I left to go to SandPiper, Tony came to the Tailwind flight school. And then a few months later, Tony joined us at SandPiper. And then I flowed over to Legacy in August of 17. And, Tony, I think you were shortly right
April
after that.
18,
so,
yeah.
Yep. So very similar stories from there. But so it didn't have, I didn't grow up flying all these other airplanes. It's just the trainers and general aviation and flight training and then right into the airline environment.
Well, and so this is exactly the spirit of what I enjoy about being a captain. That this is what I try to remind guys of why they got into it, because you see people light up and they start talking about that moment they got fired up, or you'll fly with a guy and he's got his jacket up in the windshield and he's in a cave. And I'm like, hey, look out the window. And he goes, why? I go, because this is why we did this. And it's cool because 99% of people light up. We're very similar. There's very few people in this industry that hasn't had a spark, even if they're strictly professional pilot, they're grumpy, you could still get them to fire up. And I try to have that conversation because it's fun.
Totally.
And you reflect. There was a guy who was real ultra sour, and he goes, I said, you remember when you got this job, the day you got this job, how fired up you were? And he goes, that's a good point. I'm like, you're here, you're living it.
Yeah. The captain I just flew with we were both like that. I mean, you said, keep the windows open the whole time. We took off out of, we went from Charlotte to Denver and then Denver to Philly. So a little bit of a day, right? 7.5 hours or so of flying. And the whole time, our heads, both of us, were out the window looking at all the little towns and all the little, the little fishing holes and he was ex-Air Force and he's from Mississippi. So as we're flying across these little towns and areas, he's like, oh, dude, we used to come ripping across this range right here at low level. And then, you'd see this little pond and you see guys fishing in the pond. So you give them a little air show as you cross, and I'm just like, this is so cool. You're just listening to the whole thing. And then, I wouldn't have much of that kind of a story, but I say, hey, when I was at SandPiper, we stayed in Chattanooga. Right. The hotel was haunted. And, you went to the diner across the street, or you went for the ride down the river, the whole way. I mean, it was a 2.5, 3 hour flight. And, next thing you know, we're getting ready to hit top of descent and start our way down. And we're like, oh man, now we got to, come inside and do some real flying stuff.
and it all happens like the snap of Thanos's fingers, man. Exactly. You're like, whoa, where did that time go?
Next thing you know, the 3 hours go by.
Yep.
The 3 years go by. The 5 years, and next thing you know, you're retiring. So enjoy it.
Yeah.
Look out the window a little bit, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. You want time to slow down, put the window closed, put the jacket up.
It's so interesting too, because I think people are like this in our industry only because they work so hard to earn it. They just get all pent up and, it's mine. I earned it. And they're afraid to just smile and laugh about it and have a good conversation and get excited about seeing a little airport, a little fishing hole, I think that's the spirit of the people that enjoy the career and the people that don't. You have to just be the kind of person that could get a kick out of little things in life, be it on a road trip or in an airplane.
Exactly.
Very true. Yep. Well, gentlemen, it has been an honor to speak with all of you today. Tony, I want to just say thank you so much for agreeing to sit down with us and giving us a little bit of your journey in aviation. It has been such a delight, as Roger mentioned, to have a conversation with someone who is so positive and really just gets it. I'm sure that there are many aviators out there that you've flown with that feel that you are a large part of the mentor experience that they've experienced. I think that's really why you and I hit it off so well when we flew together at SandPiper. I look forward to a day where you and I can fly together again in the future because, like you said, those flights are a pleasure. To be with someone who just clicks and has a positive attitude. And, you know, when you're in the left seat, part of that is they say, well, you're not going to have a problem with the airplane. You're going to have a problem, you know, setting the tone of the cockpit. You're going to want to set that tone to be a positive one. And when you're flying with someone who is so positive, regardless of what seat they're in, it really does help set that tone for a positive experience in aviation. And man, you should be the poster child for that because it is definitely a pleasure to listen to you speak about this passionate career that we all share. So thank you.
Thanks for having me, Tony.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Rob.
And for all you listeners out there, thank you so much for listening to our program. Do you enjoy the Squawk Ident podcast? Well, if so, we encourage you to visit our website at aviatortony.com. That's Alpha, Victor, the number 8, Romeo, Tango, Oscar, November, Yankee.com. There, right on the homepage, you can find multiple methods to contribute to our show, either by sending us some feedback or becoming a producer and help us with production expenses to keep the show going. You can also leave us audio feedback and show topics that you would like us to cover. And you can also view the many photos that we've shared both from the flight line and from our guest book. Facebook and Instagram users can find us under the Squawk Ident podcast tab. YouTube and Twitter users can look us up via Aviator Tony and the Squawk Ident. We encourage you to support our YouTube channel with a like, subscribe, and a share. And don't forget to select the little bell to be notified of any new videos. Well, in closing, I'd like to just say thank you for taking the time to listen to these grateful aviators. Keep the dirty side down out there, be safe, and take care of each other.
Take care, guys. Tony, it's great meeting you. Best of luck to you. Rob, glad to hear your daughter's all right.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Charvella, hang in there.
Thank you, Roger. You too.
See you, Roger.
Bye, everyone.
Later.
Take care, guys.